Chapter 1. Mr. Song, I have something to talk to you about. The weather was good that day. Song Yanqing, accompanied by his bodyguards, finished the routine checkup. He walked in the crowd, wearing a long thin gray windbreaker and a tailored suit underneath. He was dressed too formally for a patient who came to the hospital for a checkup. Moreover, under the blazing sun, he was wearing clothes that were too warm. It made people wonder if something would happen to him if he was covered in too much heat. However, when you saw his face, you would never say such a thing. This outfit would only show off his perfect slender body to the fullest. Even the male models on the runway would be better than him. Not to mention his otherworldly temperament. He was cold all over. Even in the hot summer, his body temperature was a few degrees lower than that of ordinary people, so he wore more clothes than ordinary people. And the checkup was a common occurrence. Moreover, he rarely appeared in front of people. Even if he was seen, no one would know that such a person was extremely weak if he didn't cough from time to time. It was under such circumstances that Song Yanqing heard that shout. Ordinary people rarely had the courage to call him. It wasn't because of him, but because of his noble status and fate. The Song family saw him as their lifeblood. Even if it was a normal conversation, the bodyguards would prevent others from getting close to Song Yanqing. Thus, his shout was especially loud and clear. The hospital was a VIP passage. They wouldn't bump into anyone when they left. Other than the doctors and nurses, there were only a few patients. Song Yanqing turned his head. Because of his usual illness, his thin and sharp eyebrows were neutralized, which made him look even more beautiful. Even if his body was weak, there were still a lot of people who wanted to get close to him. Even a word from him would be a blessing. Young master. The bodyguards frowned and blocked Song Yanqing's surroundings. They saw a girl in a hospital gown. Her body was a little thin, and her face was delicate. Her almond-shaped eyes were curved and bright. She must be a girl who would make people want to love her when she smiled. She wanted someone to touch her face even more. Song Yanqing did not recognize her. However, the bodyguard seemed to know her identity. She is the adopted daughter of the new madam of the Mu family. Song Yanqing's eyes were half closed. He seemed to have heard it before, but he was not interested in it at all. Not to mention the adopted daughter, even the young masters of the Mu family could not get close to Song Yanqing. Just as they were about to leave, they heard the girl speak with a smile. Mr. Song, I see that your glabella is turning black. I'm afraid you don't have long to live. These words were truly infuriating. Everyone knew that Song Yanqing was physically weak, but no one had ever dared to say that to his face. If the other elders of the Song family heard this girl might not even be able to see the sun the next day. What did you say? Say it again if you dare. There was a bodyguard beside Song Yanqing. He was tall and strong, even taller than Song Yanqing by a head. He couldn't help it. His fiery temper flared up, as if he couldn't wait to kill this girl on the spot. The other bodyguards didn't stop him, but they all glared at the girl. Under such circumstances, Song Yanqing seemed to be much calmer. He didn't even raise his eyebrows at the girl's words. Instead, he said flatly, "The lines are too cliché." His voice was like a harp, elegant and low. He spoke slowly, as if he could calm people down. Chapter 2. Xiao Jin smiled. She stood in the small garden outside the hospital and bathed in the sunlight. When she smiled, her teeth sparkled. I never lie. As soon as she came over, she saw that the man was emitting black gas all over his body, and there was a death aura between his eyebrows. It was a sign that he was dying. If she had not just awakened, her power was not complete, she would have been able to see more details. For example, how he would die. This man was extremely good-looking. Even Xiao Jin, who was picky, had never seen such a good-looking man. At first glance, people would feel that it was superfluous to say anything. Words of praise were not enough to describe how stunning he was. His temperament was gentle, like the best jade, flowing with the most gorgeous brilliance. It was also like white snow, which could freeze everyone's gaze on him and make them unable to look away. No one was willing to say a harsh word or question such a person. This was Song Yanqing, the only eldest grandson of the Song family. How dare you! The tall bodyguard beside Song Yanqing could no longer resist the urge to hit Xiao Jin. Don't think that we don't hit women. She dared to bully the young master and even hit women. Forget it. When the cold words fell into people's ears, it seemed that they had not experienced the cleanliness of the lingering feelings that disappeared in an instant, adding to the indifference. They got up and left. The tall bodyguard glanced at Xiao Jin and seemed to be a little angry. He glared at her through his sunglasses. If she wanted to get close to the young master, she should have found a better excuse. Why did she have to find such a hateful one? She was really not afraid of being beaten to death. Xiao Jin watched them leave and did not stop them. She just shook her head and sighed. If you don't listen to your elders, you will suffer a loss. Xiao Jin. The nurse's anxious voice came. What are you doing here? Mrs. Mu is looking for you. Xiao Jin calmly straightened her clothes and walked away with the nurse. This hospital was not an ordinary high-grade hospital. It was specially built by the Song family for Song Yanqing. But Song Yanqing did not come here often, except for the checkup. If it were not for the special identity of Xiao Jin's body, she would not have been qualified to come here. When she walked to her ward, a beautiful woman in a luxurious custom-made cheongsam was already sitting inside. Her every move was elegant and graceful. She wasn't astonishingly beautiful, but she had the posture of a beautiful woman. Even if one could see the traces of age, it still couldn't hide her elegance. Xiao Jin. Seeing her come back, Xiao Fei immediately stood up with worry in his eyes. You haven't recovered yet, what are you doing running around? Then, he glanced at Xiao Jin's wrist. Her wrist was wrapped in gauze. Last night, Xiao Jin cut her wrist in the bathtub to commit suicide. If she had not left her last words to Xiao Fei had an intuition that something was wrong and hurried over. Otherwise, Xiao Jin would have been dead. She had been here once last night. When she heard that Xiao Jin woke up this morning, she hurried over. But she did not expect that Xiao Jin was still running around. Thinking of this, Xiao Fei could not help crying. I didn't blame you for those things. Why did you take it so hard? Why couldn't we talk about it? Why did you have to commit suicide? Xiao Jin glanced at Xiao Fei and suddenly said seriously, what do you want to blame me for? Is it because I was injected with drugs? Do you think it's my fault? Xiao Fei's face suddenly froze. Chapter 3. Xiao Fei was not Xiao Jin's biological mother, but she had raised him for 20 years. She was an out-and-out good mother. However, Xiao Fei had a tragic past. She had an unforgettable relationship with the head of the Mu family and had 3 sons. However, she was not recognized by the head of the Mu family because her status was not high enough. She could not even recognize her sons. She left this sad place and adopted Xiao Jin. However, the head of the Mu family could not forget her. After taking over the power, he settled everything and took Xiao Fei back. However, Mr. Mu was not willing to raise a child who did not belong to him. He attached great importance to blood ties. However, under Xiao Fei's insistence, Xiao Jin was taken to the capital. Although she could not live with Xiao Fei often came to see her. However, Xiao Jin, who had always been well-behaved and cute under her guidance, got together with some shady people and even got addicted to drugs. Xiao Fei was shocked and angry. Before she could blame Xiao Jin too much, she received the news that Xiao Jin had committed suicide. For a moment, she was angry. However, she did not know that Xiao Jin was no longer the Xiao Jin who had committed suicide last night. If you didn't get together with them, none of this would have happened. I've already advised you. Although Xiao Fei said so, she did not dare to say it in a harsh tone. Xiao Jin had been well-behaved since he was a child. Everyone praised him as a good child. She could not understand why Xiao Jin, who was once clean and spotless, even became addicted to drugs in just half a year after he moved to the capital. She knew that Xiao Jin's failure to live with her was a blow to Xiao Jin. However, it was not like she did not see Xiao Jin in normal times. She really could not imagine it. Sigh. Xiao Jin suddenly sighed, "You don't know the truth, and I don't want to blame you." The current Xiao Jin was no longer the Xiao Jin of the past. Last night, when Xiao Jin committed suicide, she, who had wandered the world of chaos for 10,000 years, finally retrieved the last of her kind consciousness. She successfully pieced everything together and returned to her original self. She was the real Xiao Jin. The former Xiao Jin was her kind consciousness. Her true identity was Xiao Jin, the strongest array master from 10,000 years ago. If she hadn't been ambushed by her sworn enemy, she wouldn't have needed 10,000 years to piece her soul back together. Then, he descended into this brand new world. One was a modern world where people like them only existed in myths and legends. Xiao Jin used to be a good girl, but there was a reason why she got addicted to drugs. She was even framed. If there's anything you want to say, just say it, okay? Xiao Fei's eyes reddened, and tears flowed down her cheeks. I know you're angry with me. Xiao Jin, she glanced at Xiao Fei and said seriously, I'm not angry with you. The former Xiao Jin didn't blame her, but the current Xiao Jin couldn't leave a ripple in her heart, let alone blame her. Xiao Fei cried even harder. I knew you were angry with me. Xiao Jin, why were women in modern society so scary? If it weren't for the karma between her and Xiao Fei, even if she was the strongest array master in 10,000 years, Xiao Jin wouldn't be able to touch karma. She could only let Xiao Fei cry beside her. Cry all you want. There will be a time when you stop crying. No matter how much you cry, the former Xiao Jin wouldn't be able to come back. Now, there would only be her, the array master Xiao Jin. She thought of the man she saw just now and fell into deep thought. Had the people of her era really disappeared? Chapter 4. 10,000 years ago, humans existed, and they even had the strongest civilization. At that time, people's beliefs were enough to allow them to obtain great power. They were omnipotent. They were collectively known as spiritualists. And spiritualists were divided into 3 types. Array masters created arrays, defied the heavens, changed fate, replaced yin and yang, and killed the heavens and demons. Wizards could instantly replace the power of nature and had the ability to attack. For example, wind, rain, thunder, lightning, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and everything in the world could be used by them. Spiritualists could see the past and predict the future. These 2 points alone represented the power of spiritualists. The strongest could also use words to make laws, making words the strongest rules. It was also the most difficult existence to be a spiritualist. However, after the outbreak of the war, the era of spirit energy ended. As the strongest array master, she disappeared in the long river of history. Now that she had finally returned, she was facing a modern world that knew nothing about spiritual thoughts. In the 21st century, there were many countries. She was just an ordinary girl in Huaxia. The people here advocated science, rejected feudal superstitions, and used technology to achieve civilization and progress. Although they were small, they had incredible potential. An existence like Qiao Jin was a proper feudal superstition. Was that really the case? While Qiao Fei was crying, she suddenly received a call. After hearing a few words, Qiao Fei's expression changed drastically. She hurriedly looked at Qiao Jin. Jin, who did you meet when you went out just now? Did you say something? Qiao Jin immediately thought of the man who had just left. He said casually, "Yes, I met a short-lived ghost." The aura of death was almost covering his face. If he didn't die young, he would be letting society down. Upon hearing this, Qiao Fei's face turned even paler. It was rare for her to be anxious. How can you say that the young master of the Song family is the one? Her voice was a little sharp because of her impatience. Do you know that he is the young master of the Song family? Song family? Qiao Jin thought for a moment. I've never heard of him. What's his name? The aura of death was so heavy. It was suitable to collect it and make a stronger array for her. She had just returned, and her body was weak. There were many things she needed to do. She could come back, but what if her sworn enemy was still alive? She had to kill the other party before she could be at ease. Qiao Fei was so anxious that he didn't want to answer her. You're crazy, crazy. It was as if even Qiao Jin's suicide was not as important as this. Qiao Jin suddenly stretched out her hand and drew 2 lines on the bed. It seemed like she was doodling, but if one looked closely, they would find that her gestures were slightly methodical. However, there was nothing on the bed. Instead, there was a dent in the quilt where she had scratched. But after she moved, she suddenly raised her eyebrows and said, Song Yanqing. That's a good name. She turned to Qiao Fei and said, Mom, this Song Yanqing is not only a short-lived ghost, but his fate is also quite strange. Qiao Fei looked at Qiao Jin in shock. She paused and said in a trembling voice, Jin, what did you say? Qiao Jin said naturally, I said that Song Yanqing is a short-lived ghost. There is something wrong with his fate. She actually knew what her words meant to Qiao Fei. But she was used to being high and mighty. She was too lazy to explain to this group of people. She could say whatever she wanted. If it weren't for the fact that Qiao Fei was the mother of this body, she wouldn't have bothered to say these things. Qiao Fei screamed, Doctor, doctor, come and see. My daughter is crazy. Hurry up and check her brain. Qiao Jin. Chapter 5. The doctors and nurses rushed in when they heard Qiao Fei's scream. At Qiao Fei's insistence, Qiao Jin was taken to the hospital for a checkup. Qiao Jin was speechless. The doctor insisted, there is nothing wrong with Miss Qiao's brain. Everything is normal. Qiao Fei completely disagreed, but she started talking nonsense as soon as she woke up. She's crazy. For example, Song Yanqing's words could only be said by a crazy person. The doctor was stunned by Qiao Fei's words and said, about this, it may be that Miss Qiao's suicide was too much of a shock. Sometimes, when a person's emotions overreact to something, it can also affect the activity of the brain's nerves. Of course, this was not part of their field of study, so the doctor stopped talking about it. Anyway, it was right to let Qiao Fei think that it was possible. When Qiao Fei heard that Qiao Jin was agitated, tears immediately flowed out of his eyes. It's all my fault. I should have brought you back to the Mu family back then. I was foolish. It's been so many years. After all, you're the child that I've raised for 20 years. She was crying sincerely at this moment. She thought that it was a big mistake not to take Xiao Jin with her. However, because of this, Xiao Fei's 3 biological sons thought that Xiao Jin had taken away all their mother's love. They were very hostile to Xiao Jin, even though Xiao Jin was their sister in name. They found someone to get close to Xiao Jin and gradually brought Xiao Jin to the edge of no return. For people like them who were high and mighty, if they wanted to destroy someone, it would be too easy. Xiao Fei thought that Xiao Jin was talking nonsense just now. At this moment, she grabbed Xiao Jin's wrist and said, "Jin, I won't leave you outside. This time, I must take you back to the Mu family. If he doesn't agree, I will divorce him." Xiao Jin was speechless. Xiao Fei said it with great momentum. In fact, Xiao Jin knew that Xiao Fei was controlled by Xiao Jin. If she could, she would not have left Xiao Jin behind. However, Xiao Jin did not expect Xiao Fei to be so stubborn this time. Xiao Fei thought that there was something wrong with her brain. If she continued to stay outside, it would cause a disaster. Xiao Fei went back to negotiate with her husband. Meanwhile, Xiao Jin was left in the hospital with the nurses watching over her. She could not go anywhere. Although these people could not control Xiao Jin. Xiao Jin's body was 20 years old this year. She was currently in her 2nd year of university here. Her studies were not bad, but in the past 6 months, because of the transfer and because she was deliberately led astray, her grades had plummeted. Xiao Fei did not understand the specific reason. She thought that Xiao Jin had been blinded by the colorful world in the capital. However, there was karma in this world. Xiao Jin used to be the strongest array master, so she had karma. Now that Xiao Jin had returned, those who harmed her would be bitten by Xiao Jin's powerful karma. Xiao Jin did not even have to do it himself. Xiao Fei's 3 sons included. Thinking of this, Xiao Jin paid more attention to Song Yanqing, who he met today. Of course, it was not because of his face, but because of the strong aura of death on his body. This kind of extremely weak fate was obviously problematic. However, he was born in an extremely noble family. It was simply contradictory. The aura of death on his body was a good thing that Xiao Jin used to make arrays. However, she had to find an opportunity to get close to him and absorb the aura of death. Unfortunately, she seemed to have said something wrong today. She should have left an impression, but the bodyguards beside him looked like they wanted to beat her to death. She had good intentions. Sigh. Chapter 6. Among the psychic sorcerers, the array sorcerers were more complicated. Compared to the direct attack of the sorcerers, all the means of the array sorcerers were based on the premise of the array sorcerers. But the power was not comparable to the average sorcerers. At this point, Xiao Jin could be said to have changed his fate. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to have her soul scattered under the joint attack of her old enemies, but still tenaciously existing consciousness. It took her 10,000 years to finally see the light again. The dead could not be resurrected. This was also an affirmation in their era. Death was death, and there would be no soul left behind. But Xiao Jin could change his fate, which was already against the law of heaven and earth. She had to pay a certain price, and she needed to set up the array sorcerers to withstand the backlash. Song Yanqing's death energy was one of the important materials for setting up the array sorcerers. The death energy on his body had never been seen even in her era. It was really tempting. At this time, her mobile phone suddenly rang. She looked at it and saw Tan Shuajia's name flashing on it. Tan Shuajia. Xiao Jin's mouth raised a strange smile. This person was the culprit who framed Xiao Jin and made him addicted to drugs. A woman sent by the son of the Mu family to approach Xiao Jin. She was beautiful, but because of her own reasons, she had been in the dark for a long time. She had been wandering in the dark for a long time. She was scheming and her means were also quite ruthless. Xiao Jin was injected with drugs by them unconsciously. When she returned home and found that she was addicted to drugs, she could not bear the blow and committed suicide. The fate of the kind consciousness came to an end. The array sorceress Xiao Jin's consciousness returned, and their souls returned to their places. 10,000 years had passed, but it did not matter. She could not live in any era. Tan Xuejia was the one who first bullied Xiao Jin, so she would suffer the backlash very quickly. But now she came to Xiao Jin, probably because she received the news of Xiao Jin's suicide and wanted to see the truth. However, since he had delivered himself to the door, Xiao Jin still had to meet him. She picked up the phone. Before Xiao Jin could say anything, the voice on the other side of the phone rang out like a machine gun. "Where are you? I heard that you committed suicide. What happened? Do you have to do this? What's so difficult about it?" It was worth mentioning that Tan Xuejia appeared to be cold and aloof. She liked gothic and dark styles. In the eyes of outsiders, she was a very cool woman. However, she had a dark heart. Since she was young, she had always been a bully. Because she knew a lot of people, had a deep network of connections, and had her beauty as her capital, she had done many immoral things. Xiao Jin was one of them, but it was definitely not the heaviest. However, the backlash was also the most vicious. She spoke in her usual aloof and indifferent manner. She was even a little annoyed by Xiao Jin's unreasonable suicide. If it were not for Third Young Master Mu's order, she would not have bothered to get close to such an idiot. He could have easily destroyed it, but he still wanted to play with it slowly. "Ha!" Xiao Jin opened his mouth. His voice was clear, like the clear spring flowing through the rocks in the mountain, with a different kind of sweetness and emptiness. "I was injected with drugs by you. In your eyes, is this just a hurdle?" Such a voice went straight to Tan Xuejia's head through the phone, making her scalp tingle. Tan Xuejia calmed down and thought it was just her illusion. She immediately denied it. "Don't talk nonsense. What does your drug use have to do with me? It's you who didn't listen to my advice and insisted on playing with those people." Chapter 7. At that time, Xiao Jin had been drunk by her. Maybe Xiao Jin didn't know what he did before. Now Xiao Jin knew it clearly. Even if she said she didn't have any memories, she only needed to cast a simple array formation to see everything related to her from Tan Xuejia. "Okay." Xiao Jin let go of this easily. "Maybe I remember wrong. I'm in the hospital now. Don't you want to come and see me?" She didn't speak as softly as usual. It sounded clear and crisp. There was a bit of autocracy that she didn't have before. It was as if she couldn't be disobeyed. Tan Xuejia had a bad feeling and subconsciously wanted to refuse. However, she realized that she couldn't bring herself to reject him. Through the phone, for some reason, she said hoarsely, "Okay." Xiao Jin was very satisfied. "I'll wait for you." These 3 words were like a spell, tightly attached to Tan Xuejia's body. She was stunned for a moment. When she woke up, the scorching sun was above her head, and she shivered. Why did she feel that something was wrong? But she couldn't tell what was wrong. In the hospital, Xiao Jin soon saw Tan Xuejia. She was wearing a t-shirt with suspenders. She was tall and slender, and under the super shorts were straight long legs. Her delicate and beautiful face was painted with dark gothic makeup. She was like a doll, so beautiful that it was unreal. Her nose was also very high, but there was a sense of disharmony when you looked closely. She had plastic surgery. But other than that, her face was impeccable. This was a woman whose appearance could be rated 90 points. However, Her exposed skin was covered in large patches of tattoos. The blood-red roses and wild roses were strong and enchanting. Compared with Tan Shuajia, Qiao Jin was thin and slender. She looked shorter than Tan Shuajia, but that was because Tan Shuajia was too tall. Qiao Jin's proportions were also not bad. Her face was also delicate, especially her pair of almond-shaped eyes were full of blazing brilliance, very bright and beautiful. She was like the most brilliant sun. The light could burn people's eyes. In the past, Qiao Jin was still a little weak, but that was enough to annoy Tan Shuajia. Looking at her again, Tan Shuajia found that her charm had become even more intense, so intense that it was impossible to ignore. How annoying. He was clearly a pitiful person who was addicted to drugs. What right did he have to have such a demeanor? When Qiao Jin saw Tan Shuajia, his thoughts were completely different. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. I was right. Tan Shuajia was stunned. What did you say? Unbeknownst to her, in Qiao Jin's eyes, her entire face was covered by a gray aura. As soon as Qiao Jin's main body returned, her powerful spiritual sense caused those who had bullied her to begin to suffer a backlash. Tan Shuajia was the first. The gray aura represented bad luck. Tan Shuajia was about to be in trouble. Black qi was pure death qi. Once touched by it, one would die without a doubt. Therefore, Qiao Jin was very interested in Song Yanqing's death qi. With such a strong death qi, it was a miracle that he was still alive. Tan Shuajia's death qi was not 1,000th of Song Yanqing's, but it was enough for Qiao Jin to have some effect. She smiled even more happily. It's useless anyway. Why don't I do something good? Tan Shuajia's expression was tense. She stared at Qiao Jin tightly. What do you mean? As soon as she came in, she said some inexplicable nonsense. What good could she do? The next second, Qiao Jin approached her. Chapter 8. Tan Shuajia was startled, but Qiao Jin's finger brushed past her eyebrows like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. It was so fast that Tan Shuajia didn't even have time to react before she withdrew her hand. Tan Shuajia felt as if she had been fooled. She took a big step back and said, "Are you crazy?" Qiao Jin saw the gray gas at her fingertips, which only she could see, and there was even a wisp of black gas growing inside. She immediately looked at Tan Shuajia with interest. You have a life on you. Otherwise, what she had done wouldn't have been fatal. But now, because of the backlash, it had turned into a death aura. That could only mean that someone had died because of Tan Shuajia. Tan Shuajia was so scared that she couldn't maintain her cold demeanor anymore. Her face turned pale. What nonsense are you talking about? She waved her hand to express her anger. Qiao Jin, are you crazy? Qiao Jin just smiled. I advise you not to speak ill of me. The fiercer you are, the faster you will die. Tan Shuajia, her head was throbbing. Qiao Jin withdrew her hand and sighed. You used to treat me as a good sister, but now you've changed your mind. If Tan Shuajia hadn't pretended to be kind back then, how could she have gotten close to Qiao Jin? Kindness was blind. In the past, Qiao Jin thought that Tan Shuajia's appearance was just to cover up her soft and kind heart. Then the two became familiar with each other. Being kind by nature, one wouldn't think the worst of others. In Tan Shuajia's eyes, she was indeed stupid. Tan Shuajia's mouth twitched. Now that Qiao Jin was addicted to drugs, the days ahead would be very difficult. She had achieved her goal. Of course, she didn't care whether Qiao Jin was dead or alive. She didn't want to act anymore. Qiao Jin waved her hand. Forget it. You can go. I need to rest for a while. She felt that Xiao Fei would come looking for her soon. She had absorbed Tan Xuejia's gray energy, but it couldn't change Tan Xuejia's fate. Something would happen to her, and Xiao Jin could only watch. Tan Xuejia, she felt that Xiao Jin was toying with her. She glared at Xiao Jin and said hatefully, "You're crazy." After saying that, he waved his hand and left. Xiao Jin's personality was a little different from before. She had noticed it, but Tan Xuejia thought it was because she was too stimulated by the suicide. Coupled with her drug addiction, it was normal for her to be delirious. She was not far from being crazy. After Tan Xuejia left, Xiao Jin saw that the gray gas on his fingertips was growing more and more black gas. She snorted softly. In the afternoon, Xiao Fei came to Xiao Jin again. This time, she was still teary-eyed. She said to Xiao Jin, "Jin, I did it. He promised to let you go to the Mu family as long as you are obedient. Jin, don't be afraid of your drug addiction. You just got it. We will find a way to cure you." Xiao Jin opened her mouth. She suddenly felt that it was okay to call her mom unconsciously, but now she felt that it was inappropriate to call her mom seriously. Because she was not raised by a mother, she didn't have this concept. Now, she didn't want others to take advantage of her. However, because of the karma of her body, she couldn't break off the relationship. They would definitely be involved in the future. Her hunches had always been 100% accurate. Thinking of this, she suddenly said, "How about I call you Xiao Fei?" Xiao Fei. Chapter 9. Xiao Fei was dumbfounded. Seeing her expression, Xiao Jin thought about it seriously. "You don't like it? It's a little unfamiliar. How about this? I'll call you Fei Fei from now on." Xiao Fei, her face was about to turn red. "I'm your mother." However, her daughter's brain was no longer normal. In order not to agitate Xiao Jin, she forced a smile and said, "If you want to call me that, it's up to you. But when you see your Uncle Mu, you can't call him that." Xiao Jin was satisfied that she accepted the name Fei Fei. "What's your husband's name?" "Mu what?" "Xiao Fei, Mu Zhenming." "You can call him Uncle Mu." Xiao Jin suddenly understood. "Oh, Zhenming." Xiao Fei, what exactly went wrong for Xiao Jin to become like this? With a sad expression, she could only ask the doctor about Xiao Jin's physical condition. However, the doctor was also very surprised. Xiao Jin had committed suicide yesterday and was admitted to the hospital. There was a scary wound on her wrist. Although the bleeding had stopped, it was reasonable to say that there was still a period of recovery. However, when they examined Xiao Jin just now, they found that the wound had already coagulated. Although it still looked scary, it wouldn't be a big deal if she was a little careful. Her physical condition was also normal. However, there are still remnants of drugs in her body. Her drug addiction will act up anytime and anywhere. Our suggestion is to stay in the hospital for a while. Xiao Fei naturally knew about Xiao Jin's current problem. After discussing with the doctor, she came to look for Xiao Jin. "Jin, I've talked to the doctor. You should stay in the hospital for a while. Mom will come to see you every day. When we're sure that you're fine, we can go back." The main problem was the drugs in Xiao Jin's body. The other problems weren't big. Xiao Jin naturally knew what she was worried about, but he didn't mind. He nodded and waved his hand. "Fei Fei, if you have something to do, go ahead." Xiao Fei, whenever she heard the words Fei Fei, the corners of her mouth would always twitch. She had nothing to say to Xiao Jin. Although it was best for a mother to stay by her daughter's side, Xiao Jin didn't really need her now. Moreover, there were several nurses looking after Xiao Jin. She didn't need Xiao Fei to stay behind. Moreover, she had to make some preparations to bring Xiao Jin back to the Mu family. After Xiao Fei left, Xiao Jin's first night in this world arrived. Xiao Jin sat cross-legged on the bed. A nurse who came to check on her suddenly saw Xiao Jin sitting on the bed and looking at the night view outside the window. She felt a little strange. Xiao Jin's drug addiction could break out at any time, so the nurse came to check on her from time to time. This was a private hospital specially built by the Song family for Song Yanqing. But because of its superb technology, it had become the top private hospital in the capital and the first choice of celebrities. The hospital built for Song Yanqing could cure others, but it couldn't cure Song Yanqing. It was also a great wonder in the capital. Xiao Jin stayed in a VIP ward because of Xiao Fei's problem. She was alone, and the nurse's service was comparable to a 5-star service. The nurse came in to measure Xiao Jin's blood pressure. When she took a syringe and was about to draw Xiao Jin's blood, Xiao Jin said, "I'll do it myself." The nurse was stunned. "Miss Xiao, you might hurt yourself if you come. But if you come, you'll hurt me and you'll be hurt. I think you've been very unlucky recently." The nurse, her face froze. Chapter 10. She just wanted to draw blood for her. What the hell was she talking about? However, the patients here were all existences that they couldn't afford to offend. The nurse smiled and said, "You must be joking." She had been a little unlucky recently, but it wasn't to the extent that Xiao Jin said she was quite unlucky. What backlash? It sounded like a line from a lunatic. Forget it. I'll do it. Xiao Jin was very straightforward. He took the needle and didn't do anything. He directly pierced the needle into her arm and drew out a little blood. That's about it. Then, he applied a hemostatic cotton to the wound. The nurse was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say. If the head nurse found out, she would probably be very sad. Xiao Jin suddenly turned to look at her and said, "Why don't you go back to your house soon?" The ability of an array formation master was not only to confuse people and kill people without leaving a trace, but also to reverse the fate of others and see the past and future. As the strongest array formation master, Xiao Jin had reached the point where he didn't need to set up an array to see a person's fate from their face. Of course, the weaker the fate, the easier it was to see through it. This was similar to the feng shui that had been circulating in China. However, feng shui might be a clue passed down by an array formation master. Moreover, if an array formation master wanted to achieve his goal, setting up an array was the foundation. One's face could only be seen as the foundation. The nurse panicked when she heard this. Do you have something against me? Wasn't he implying that she should get lost and go home? With Xiao Jin's status, if he complained about her, he would definitely be fired. Of course not. Xiao Jin said, "If you can't go back, it's best to ask your brother to pay attention to the cars, black ones." The nurse was speechless. Her face instantly turned deathly pale. "How do you know I have a brother?" You could say that Xiao Jin was cursing her, but how could she have known that the young nurse had a younger brother for no reason? Xiao Jin just came in last night. The nurse naturally didn't want to believe it. She thought that Xiao Jin was talking nonsense. However, she didn't dare to say anything. She silently lowered her head and packed up the syringe and other things. "Xiao Jin, I can find out if I want to." The nurse was speechless. Perhaps he heard it somewhere. The nurse knew that Xiao Jin's mother had said that her brain had become abnormal. Perhaps it was because of this abnormality that she was a little strange. There were always some people who felt that they had been stimulated by something and that they knew the world like the back of their hand. The nurse had seen similar cases before. She did not want to believe it, but she could not say anything about Xiao Jin. It was just that he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. For no reason at all, Xiao Jin suddenly reminded her brother to pay attention to the car. Didn't that mean that something was going to happen? If it were anyone else, they would be speechless. She packed her things and went out quickly. She didn't notice that Xiao Jin's fingers brushed against her body when he took the needle. When she went out, a wisp of gray gas that no one else could see dissipated in Xiao Jin's hand. It wasn't just a sign that something was going to happen to the person involved. It could also be seen when something was going to happen to someone who was very close to them. She had taken back the gray gas and done a good deed. Whether the other party believed it or not was none of her business. She continued to look out the window and smiled softly. In the night sky hidden under this bustling city, there was always an undercurrent flowing under the calm curtain. In this world, it seemed that there were traces of legends about them. Chapter 11. When the nurse came out of Xiao Jin's ward, the head nurse asked her, "Huoling, are you all right?" Huoling shook her head, no, but she was a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, she didn't tell her that Xiao Jin had talked about her brother. She only told her that Xiao Jin had drawn her own blood. The head nurse's face suddenly darkened. Nonsense. She's a patient. How could you let her do that? The point was that Xiao Jin was nothing, but her mother was. They couldn't afford to offend Mrs. Mu. Huoling cried, "I'm sorry, head nurse, but I couldn't stop her." The head nurse heard the whole story. Seeing that it was nothing serious, she said, "Forget it. Don't tell anyone about this. Otherwise, you'll suffer." Huoling nodded quickly, "Yes, head nurse. I know." Those who could enter this hospital were not ordinary nurses. They were all top graduates. But it didn't mean that they were important. After all, there were a lot of people who wanted to enter this hospital. No one wanted to make mistakes. But the patient was stubborn, and they couldn't stop her. Thinking of what Xiao Jin had said, Huoling still found it hard to understand. She just shook her head. Forget it. There was no need to care about a patient's words. Xiao Jin was going to stay in the hospital for a week. Except for Tan Xuejia and Xiao Fei, who came on the first day, she didn't have any other friends. After all, she had only been in the capital for half a year. She was not familiar with anyone. It was natural that no one came to see her. Xiao Jin wasn't famous in the hospital. Except that she was Mrs. Mu's daughter, there was no other gossip. But she took drugs, which proved that this young lady was probably not a good person. However, surprisingly, Xiao Jin didn't have any drug addiction in a few days. Even in the checkup, the doctor found that the drug residue in her body was getting less and less. It was almost to the point that it was almost insignificant. But it didn't make sense. Once a person got addicted to drugs, especially this kind of new drug, no matter how powerful they were, they couldn't escape. Not only did Xiao Jin's drug addiction not act up, but there were also no side effects. If it weren't for the fact that her medical report was clear when she entered the hospital, the doctor would have suspected that she didn't take drugs at all. However, Xiao Jin did not care about the doubts of the doctors. She wandered around the hospital, hoping to find the gray energy and the death energy. Only these two were useful. There was also a light green gas that only people who were seriously ill would have. However, this gas was not very useful. It was only useful for harming people. There were quite a few people in the hospital who had a sickly aura, but Xiao Jin was not interested in collecting them. It was also because of her wandering around that she received complaints from other patients in the hospital. It was fine if she didn't respond, but the moment she tried to strike up a conversation with someone, the first thing she said was, "You have to be careful these days. Who wouldn't be angry after hearing what you said?" Wasn't this a curse? Most importantly, she was not a patient. Most of the time, she was the patient's family member who tried to strike up a conversation. The poor hospital had no choice but to explain that she was a special case. She had been traumatized by her recent suicide attempt, so they didn't want to stoop to her level. For this reason, Xiao Fei would receive complaints from the doctors every day when he came to the hospital. "Xiao Fei, what can I do? Didn't you hear her calling me Fei Fei? She didn't even acknowledge her mother. How could she say good things to others?" Xiao Fei was very depressed. After confirming that there was no drug residue in Xiao Jin's body, Xiao Fei had no choice but to discharge her from the hospital. Chapter 12. Xiao Jin changed into simple casual home clothes and sat in the luxury car. Xiao Fei was trying to persuade him. "Lil Jin, you really shouldn't talk nonsense. A week ago, you talked about the young master of the Song family. If your uncle hadn't come forward to explain for you, the Song family wouldn't have let it go." Song Yanqing had always been regarded as the lifeblood of the Song family. The Song family couldn't even bear to say a harsh word to him. Xiao Jin cursed others as soon as he came up. He was basically a typical example of courting death. Speaking of Song Yanqing, Xiao Jin was a little interested. "Fei Fei, is Song Yanqing okay recently?" Xiao Fei, if she hadn't been sure that Xiao Jin had never seen Song Yanqing before, she would have suspected that Xiao Jin had a crush on Song Yanqing before. Although Song Yanqing was a person that all girls couldn't extricate themselves from when they saw him. However, Xiao Fei felt that Xiao Jin's excitement was a little strange. And his words were strange and irritating. "Don't talk nonsense." She covered Xiao Jin's mouth and said anxiously, "If the Song family hears this, there will be a big problem." Xiao Jin pushed her hand away. "Okay, I won't say it if you don't like it. But it's not a good thing that Song Yanqing is okay. If he is okay recently, it means that he is really going to die." Xiao Fei's face turned pale, and her body began to tremble. Xiao Jin said as if nothing had happened. "Don't be afraid. I won't say it." She just wanted to find an opportunity to do a good deed. Couldn't she take away Song Yanqing's death aura and benefit society before she died? Alas! When the car arrived at the Xiao Jin's house, Xiao Fei's self-healing ability was amazing. Seeing that Xiao Jin did not fart, he quickly pretended that nothing had happened. He raised his head and said to Xiao Jin naturally, "In addition to your Uncle Mu, you have 3 brothers. Big brother Mu Qiji is currently overseas on a business trip. You won't be able to see him for the time being. The second brother and the third brother were twins. The second brother was Musichu, and the third brother was Musilian. If you don't recognize it, you can call me whatever I tell you later. Most importantly, your Uncle Mu, do you understand?" With this kind of attitude, she was indeed worthy of being the female lead in other novels. Xiao Jin straightened his attitude. "Fei Fei, you and Jinming are really capable. She actually gave birth to 3 sons in succession." Xiao Fei blushed suspiciously and rebuked, "Jin, what are you talking about? Xiao Jin, you're actually able to give birth to 3 sons. That's pretty great. What are you thinking?" Xiao Fei, she straightened her face and emphasized once again, "Uncle Mu." After saying that, she got out of the car with Xiao Jin and walked into the Mu residence. The car stopped in front of the courtyard of the Mu residence. The Mu family lived in the luxurious area. Although it was originally divided into villas, it was different from the usual style. There was a wall blocking the outside, and it occupied a large area. The house inside was built with glass as the main building material, and there were a few specially planted towering trees as a shelter. It was not only private but also refreshing on all sides. It also looked especially luxurious and magnificent. The style was mainly simple and cool, and it looked especially refreshing in the summer. The head of the Mu family had quite a young aesthetic standard. The house was surrounded by a huge garden, and it occupied a large area. There were some cobblestone paths in the middle, and there were balconies and swimming pools on several floors. This was the world of the rich. Xiao Fei held Xiao Jin's hand and walked into the living room on the first floor. It was spacious and neat, and Mu Jinming was sitting in front of a specially designed sofa in the middle, looking at his phone. When he heard that they were back, his sharp gaze followed them. Chapter 13. Apart from Mu Jinming, there were only a few servants in the huge living room. Xiao Fei's twin brother wasn't here either. Jinming. Xiao Fei's voice made Xiao Jin look at him in a different light. She had never thought that Xiao Fei's voice could be so sweet and greasy. Most importantly, it was sweet but not pretentious. It sounded quite normal. She walked towards Mu Jinming. She was more delicate than usual, but this kind of delicateness seemed to be something a woman would change in front of the man she liked. "I'm back with Jean." She waved at Xiao Jin and winked at Xiao Jin crazily. "Xiao Jin, come here and greet your Uncle Mu." Mu Jinming had the perfect posture of a head of the family and a leader. Even though he was in his 50s, he still had a tall and straight body and a face that was worthy of praise. People would believe it if they said that he was a man in his 30s or 40s. This family seemed to be skilled in retaining their youthful looks. Xiao Fei also looked young. However, Xiao Fei was born with it. Mu Jinming's was a fragrance that was nurtured by money. Mu Jinming looked at Xiao Jin and nodded slightly. He didn't like Xiao Fei's adopted daughter to begin with. Xiao Fei dumped him and his son and let a complete stranger enjoy her motherly love for 20 years. Now, Xiao Fei wanted to bring her back. He didn't throw a tantrum. It was just the self-restraint that a successful man should have. His status didn't allow him to blame a girl too much. Thus, he could only turn a blind eye. Xiao Fei had been quarreling with him over Xiao Jin's matter for the past few days. He seemed quite determined. He had no choice but to agree to let Xiao Jin stay with the Mu family. Mu Jinming didn't have any expression on his face. Xiao Fei winked at Xiao Jin and asked her to hurry up and greet him. Xiao Jin was silent for a while before saying naturally, "Jinming, hello." Mu Jinming, his face seemed to crack for a moment. Xiao Fei's expression collapsed. The servants who were cleaning the room were also stunned. Could it be that this new miss had gone crazy? Mu Jinming looked at Xiao Fei with a questioning gaze. Xiao Fei's gaze shifted back and forth between Mu Jinming and Xiao Jin. In the suffocating atmosphere, Xiao Fei couldn't help but wipe away her tears. She was about to cry. "Hubby, you know," the doctor said. There was something wrong with Xiao Jin's brain. She must have told Mu Jinming about this when she returned home. When Mu Jinming recalled the unhappy call from the Song family a few days ago, he immediately had no good impression of Xiao Jin. But what could he do? How could he stoop to the level of a person who had a screw loose? He thought for a moment, then slowly said, "Let's get ready to eat." His voice was steady and powerful, and he had the demeanor and leadership of a general. Look, this was the self-restraint and model of a successful man in the upper-class society. Xiao Fei was about to speak when Xiao Jin nodded with satisfaction. "Jinming, I agree with what you said." She was indeed a little hungry. Mu Jinming, Xiao Fei hurriedly grabbed her husband and calmed his restless soul. Her eyelashes were filled with tears. "Hubby, please. I have raised her for 20 years. I only have one daughter. For my sake, please forgive her. You know that she has been agitated recently. After this period of time, she will be fine." After this period of time, Mu Jinming, what else could he do? For his wife's sake, he could only endure it. But was Xiao Jin really crazy or just pretending? Chapter 14. The atmosphere at the dining table was very quiet. Xiao Fei did not see her twin sons, so she looked around and asked Mu Jinming, "Honey, where are Qi Chu and Qi Lian?" Mu Jinming paused and glanced at Xiao Jin, who was sizing up the bowls and chopsticks, before looking away. They went out with a friend. Actually, she just did not want to see Xiao Jin. After all, as a father, she knew what the twins were thinking. They blamed Xiao Jin for monopolizing Xiao Fei's love for 20 years, so they did not like Xiao Jin. Tonight, when they found out that Xiao Jin was coming back, they threw a tantrum. However, they did not dare to do it in front of Xiao Fei, so they found an excuse to leave. Xiao Fei was a little disappointed and then a little unhappy. She muttered, "Why didn't you come to see your sister?" Even if they were not related by blood, she had raised them. Before Xiao Jin came back, Xiao Fei wanted to introduce her sons to him, but she refused. Xiao Jin waved his hand. "Hey, Fei Fei, don't worry about these small things. You will see him tomorrow morning. Don't worry." Mu Jinming, when he heard Hu Jinyao call her Fei Fei, the corners of his eyes twitched. The hands of the servants holding the bowls and chopsticks trembled and they almost dropped the bowls. After a week of torture, Xiao Fei was used to being called Fei Fei. She asked curiously, "How does Jin know that you will see brother tomorrow morning?" Xiao Jin said, "I know with my fingers." Xiao Fei, "Crazy, crazy." She immediately shut her mouth. Mu Jinming, he did not want to eat anymore. He felt inexplicably stifled. The moment he saw Xiao Fei bring Xiao Jin back, he already had a bad feeling. It was just a feeling, but he could not tell what it was. The members of the Mu family always ate their own meals. Even if it was a luxurious meal, each person would have a separate portion. There was no sharing of food. Xiao Fei was still very concerned about Xiao Jin. "Jin, are the dishes to your liking?" Xiao Jin, "Not bad." The food she ate was just to sustain her life. Actually, the taste was not bad, but compared to what she ate in the past, it was a little lacking. After all, at that time, there were many delicious foods that contained spiritual energy. Naturally, their fragrances couldn't be compared to now. If it wasn't for Mu Jinming's good self-restraint, he wouldn't have been able to restrain himself from sneering. The head chef of the Mu family was a Michelin 3-star chef. Even the chef who cooked the Chinese cuisine was an international chef who had cooked for state banquets. When it came to Xiao Jin, he only said that it was okay. Xiao Fei also smiled awkwardly. He realized that it was not easy to talk to Xiao Jin now. He was also afraid that she would say something, so he didn't dare to ask anymore. When they were almost done eating, Xiao Fei mentioned Xiao Jin's studies. "Jin, you have to go to school. I applied for a month's leave for you. When the time is up, you still have to go to school, okay?" Xiao Jin, "Okay." Seeing that she agreed without hesitation, Xiao Fei breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was still some time. During this time, Xiao Jin should recuperate. Her brain should be able to return to normal, right? Mu Jinming did not express his opinion. After eating, he elegantly wiped the corners of his mouth with a tissue. "I'm done eating. I'll go back to work." Xiao Fei smiled and waved. "Honey, go ahead." Xiao Jin nodded and said, "Jinming, go ahead. Work hard." Xiao Fei's smile stiffened again. Mu Jinming had just stood up and almost lost his balance. He supported himself on the table. In an instant, he closed his eyes and calmed himself down. With an inexplicable heart attack, he walked upstairs. Chapter 15. Xiao Fei had given up struggling with Xiao Jin's stubbornness. She was about to take Xiao Jin to her room after dinner when she suddenly heard Xiao Jin say after wiping his mouth, "It's almost time." Xiao Fei was stunned. "What's almost time?" Xiao Jin smiled mysteriously. "It has nothing to do with you. Something had happened to someone." Of course, it was almost time. Xiao Fei didn't ask any more questions. She excitedly took Xiao Jin to her room. Because it was handled by Xiao Fei, there was nothing dramatic about the room. She lived in a separate bedroom on the second floor like the Mu brothers. It had its own swimming pool and a large balcony. This room was usually for important guests. Xiao Jin was coming back, so Xiao Fei let Xiao Jin live in her room. It could be seen that Xiao Fei still had a say in the Mu family. Her story with Mu Zhenming was dramatic, but it didn't affect Mu Zhenming's love for her after she came back. The decoration style of the room was integrated with the manor itself. It was quite simple, and every piece of furniture was specially custom-made. One could also tell that the big bed was of an expensive yet elegant style. There were only a few dolls that young girls liked. Dolls could be seen around the cabinets. Everything was prepared for Xiao Jin. Xiao Fei was looking forward to it. "What do you think?" "Mom decorated it according to what you like. If you want anything else, just tell me." Xiao Jin nodded. "Fei Fei, you did a good job. I'm not picky about my room. It's good." Xiao Fei breathed a sigh of relief and immediately became happy. "It's good that you like it." She was afraid that Xiao Jin would be unhappy. At first, she felt that she owed Xiao Jin. Now that she saw that Xiao Jin didn't blame her, she felt much better. After all, Xiao Jin's drug addiction had always been a shadow. She was really afraid that Xiao Jin was really gone. Xiao Fei didn't want to disturb her after he arranged everything and left her room. Xiao Jin didn't have many things. He had taken them all from his previous apartment. The Xiao Fei, which was not too important, had been sifted out for her. Everything was done in an orderly manner. After all, Xiao Jin committed suicide in that apartment. For both Xiao Fei and Xiao Jin, there was a knot in their hearts. Xiao Jin didn't have any particular opinion. She opened her hand, and the gray qi she took back from Tan Shuajia's body was now completely dead. Tan Shuajia was dead. The death qi lingered around Xiao Jin's hand. After she looked at it, she withdrew it. At this moment, she felt a cold and damp aura slowly approaching her. It had no shadow, no color, and no smell. It was a sign, a kind of counterattack. She had changed her fate and come back to life. The counterattack was about to begin. And she needed to defend herself. Otherwise, the counterattack would not kill her, but it would affect her future. She could see other people's fates, but she couldn't see her own. However, Xiao Jin could at least have a premonition that something bad would happen to her. Now it seemed that she was going to live in the Mu family. Xiao Jin thought for a moment, squeezed a drop of blood from her body, and flicked it gently with the black qi. The black qi instantly penetrated the surrounding walls, and the drop of blood was mixed with it and dissipated completely. Just this wisp was not enough. She needed more. Xiao Jin thought that maybe she should go out and set up a fortune-telling booth. In her memory, this was quite good at scaring people. Chapter 16. Early in the morning, the cleaner had just finished cleaning the street. When she passed by a dark alley, she saw a person lying there. From the figure, she could tell that it was a woman, and her figure was very good. There was a bar street nearby, and there were often women lying everywhere, but this was the first time she was lying in an alley. The cleaner was a little hesitant. She walked over and shouted, "Miss." She noticed that the woman's body was covered in flower tattoos. When she approached, she saw the person lying on the ground and the pool of blood under her body that had solidified. It was dark and strange. Ah! Screams resounded in the vicinity. Huoling felt that she was indeed a little unlucky recently. When she got out of bed, she felt exhausted. She didn't know what was going on, but she always felt uneasy. When she walked, she sprained her ankle, and it was still swollen. Not only that, but she was also complained about by a patient's family at the hospital. Although it wasn't a big deal and the other party was being unreasonable, because she was a nurse, the final result was that her salary was deducted by 1,000 yuan. The salary here wasn't low, but 1,000 yuan was deducted for no reason. She couldn't get her full attendance and bonus for the month. Huoling felt that this was the worst of her luck. Her family wasn't very well off, and her salary was very important to her. However, the patient's family was unreasonable, and she couldn't do anything about it. What was even more unbelievable was that when she rode home on a shared bicycle last night, she hit a cat. A bicycle hit a cat to death. The elderly often said that it wasn't a good sign to hit an animal with a car. Although she was riding a bicycle, she still felt uncomfortable. Once again, she felt that she was extremely unlucky. Last night, she dreamed of the cat taking her life. When she woke up early in the morning, she was even more tired. When she was washing up, she suddenly thought of Qiao Jin's words. "You've been very unlucky recently." She stopped brushing her teeth. When Qiao Jin said that, she wasn't very unlucky. She was just a little unhappy, but later on, she started to be completely unlucky. She suddenly panicked. At this moment, her phone suddenly rang. She took a look and saw that it was her mother who was far away in her hometown. Her mother would never call her so early in the morning. The moment she saw the phone, Huoling suddenly had a bad feeling. She picked up the phone, and her mother's crying voice immediately rang out, "Huoling, something happened to your brother." Huoling's heart trembled violently, and the toothbrush in her hand fell to the ground. "Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong with brother?" Huoling's mother's cries were filled with despair and sorrow. "Your brother was hit by a car when he went out to study this morning. He was sent to the hospital now. His life is not in danger, but one of his legs is broken. What is he going to do in the future? What is he going to do for the rest of his life?" Huoling was stunned. It was as if something had exploded in his head, and there was a loud noise. She had always had a good relationship with her younger brother. She had never thought that something like this would happen. "It's best if you ask your brother to pay attention to cars, black ones." In an instant, a chill crept up from the soles of her feet. Huoling subconsciously asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, what kind of car hit little brother?" "A black car." Boom! Huoling's head completely exploded. Qiao Jin's words started to circle in her mind. Chapter 17. Huoling began to tremble all over. How was this possible? How could there be such a strange thing in this world? However, Qiao Jin's words had come true. This was the most terrifying thing. At the thought of this, Huoling hurriedly packed her things while trying to keep herself calm. "Mom, wait and see what the doctor says. If it really doesn't work, you can bring little brother to the capital and see if we have a way to treat little brother's leg. I'll send you 50,000 yuan first. You can pay for it first. I'll be back in a few days." Qiao Jin would return to the hospital for a checkup. Huoling wanted to see Qiao Jin. After talking to her mother, Huoling immediately packed her things and rushed to the hospital. She remembered that Qiao Jin's phone number and other information were in the hospital's patient records. Even if there wasn't, there was still Qiao Jin's mother's information. She knew that this was against the rules, but her brother's situation was too strange. Huo Ling wanted to understand immediately. Her mother said that her brother's leg couldn't be saved. She thought of Qiao Jin's words and asked her to go back. But she didn't. Would there be a turning point if she went back? In the end, she ignored it. Huo Ling couldn't help but cry at the thought of this. Qiao Jin woke up very early in the morning. However, it was just a normal breakfast time. When she arrived at the living room, other than Mu Zhenming, who had already left for work, there was only Qiao Fei in the living room. At the same time, a tall and slender figure walked in through the door. He was wearing a custom-made denim shirt and casual light blue loose slim-fit trousers. His hair was pulled into a seemingly messy but actually meticulously styled. With a handsome face and sharp eyes, he had the demeanor of Mu Zhenming. It was just that his temperament was slightly immature and he looked clean and youthful. One could tell at a glance that he was Mu Zhenming's son. The moment he entered, he met Qiao Jin's eyes. Qiao Fei first saw Qiao Jin coming downstairs, and then saw that one of her sons had returned. She immediately shouted in surprise, "Qi Lian." This was her third son, Muzilian. Muzilian and Musichu were twins, so they should look exactly the same. Qiao Fei could recognize Muzilian at a glance. Obviously, he was very familiar with his son. Muzilian's eyes locked onto Qiao Jin. Qiao Jin naturally saw Muzilian. However, she narrowed her eyes slightly. Muzilian and Musichu had sent people to approach Qiao Jin, forcing Qiao Jin to become addicted to drugs, which led to his suicide. Logically speaking, the two of them should have suffered quite a bit of backlash, but she didn't expect that when she saw Muzilian, there was only a faint layer of gray energy surrounding him. It was a situation where a person might be a little unlucky under normal circumstances. This obviously didn't conform to the law of karma. She was a little puzzled. Muzilian looked at her unhappily. He obviously knew Qiao Jin, so he quickly looked away from Qiao Jin and called out unhappily, "Mom." Muzilian liked his mother. Qiao Fei excitedly called out to him, "Qi Lian, come here. Look, this is your sister, Qiao Jin." Muzilian immediately retorted, "Mom, did you give birth to her? Can just anyone be my sister?" Qiao Fei's face instantly turned pale. She didn't expect that her son really disliked Qiao Jin so much. Qiao Jin waved his hand. Children at this age are very rebellious. "I understand. Fei Fei, don't mind it." "Qiao Fei, Muzilian, are you fucking crazy?" Chapter 18. Qiao Fei was a little embarrassed. "Qi Lian, your sister just came back from the hospital. She's not feeling well," she was being rather reserved. After all, she couldn't possibly tell everyone that Qiao Jin wasn't in her right mind. Muzilian sneered. "Not feeling well. I think she's not right in the head." Qiao Fei was speechless. "You're right." Qiao Jin didn't care. She even sat down and began to eat the porridge slowly. Mu Qi couldn't help but get angry when he saw how natural she was. Did she think that the Mu family was her home? He wanted to sit down and have breakfast with Qiao Fei, but when he saw Qiao Jin, he was not in the mood. He glanced at Qiao Jin and snorted coldly in a volume that everyone could hear. Then, he swung his arms and went upstairs. Qiao Fei tried to persuade him. "Hey, Qi Lian, aren't you going to eat breakfast? Aren't you hungry?" Muzilian didn't respond, expressing his dislike for Qiao Jin. Qiao Fei sat down and sighed. Why are children nowadays so complicated? Qiao Jin glanced at her. "Fei Fei, eat. Don't worry about a rebellious young man. It's easy to ruin your health. Sometimes emotions could cause changes in one's health." Qiao Fei smiled sheepishly. "I know. She also knew that even if Musilian didn't eat, the kitchen would cook for him when he was hungry. She didn't have to worry about it. As a mother, she had to show some concern. After breakfast, Xiao Jin was ready to go out. She had to observe the nearby terrain and see if it was suitable for setting up a formation. She also needed to collect more death aura. She had changed her fate and come back to life. The backlash was no joke, but it was not difficult for her. Hearing that Xiao Jin was going out, Xiao Fei panicked. "What are you going out for?" Xiao Jin said very naturally, "I'm going out to explore the human geography." Xiao Fei, now that there was something wrong with Xiao Jin's brain, how could she dare to let Xiao Jin go out alone? Xiao Fei thought for a while. "Where do you want to go? Do you want to buy clothes? Mama will go out with you." In the past, Xiao Fei had never mistreated Xiao Jin in terms of money. But now, Xiao Fei wanted to make it up to Xiao Jin, so he naturally wanted to take her shopping. Of course, Xiao Jin would not bring Xiao Fei along. Fei, I'm going to do something big. You're not suitable. You'll be a burden to me." Xiao Jin's straightforward words completely shattered Xiao Fei's fragile heart. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "Jin, what are you going to do?" No one in their right mind would say something like that. "I'm going to do something. I'll be back soon." Seeing that Xiao Fei still did not believe him, Xiao Jin repeated, "I'll be back soon. Nothing will happen. But there might be a little trouble." Xiao Fei could only watch Xiao Jin leave with a worried look. However, she could not really leave him alone. Of course, she sent someone to follow Xiao Jin secretly. If anything happened to Xiao Jin, she could bring Xiao Jin back as soon as possible. Xiao Jin certainly knew that someone was following her, but she did not care and let them follow her. She took out her mobile phone and walked out of the Mu family's gate. The moment she took out her mobile phone, she received a call. She was not surprised at all and directly picked up the phone. Chapter 19. "Hello, is this Miss Xiao Jin?" The other party spoke politely. "This is the Nanping District Police Station." It was the police station that called. Why did they call Xiao Jin? It was because Tan Shuajia had been murdered. She was found dead in an alley this morning. The cause of death was massive blood loss. She had been stabbed 52 times before she died. Due to the nature of the case, the police were investigating the clues. It was understandable that they called Xiao Jin. After all, Tan Shuajia had contacted Xiao Jin frequently. According to other people's confessions, some people said that Xiao Jin and Tan Shuajia had a conflict. So, logically speaking, Xiao Jin was still a suspect. She needed to go to the police station to record a statement. Xiao Jin had expected this. Therefore, she had no objections and went to the police station first. Xiao Fei almost fainted when he saw her go to the police station as soon as she left. He quickly sent someone to inquire about it. As for Xiao Jin, when she arrived at the police station, she was received by a rather amiable policewoman. "You know the victim, right?" Xiao Jin nodded. "Yes. Tan Shuajia did have a close relationship with her. She was Xiao Jin's best friend in the capital. But that was before. When they were in the hospital a week ago, their news was considered to have collapsed. We received some relevant information. It is said that you had a conflict with the victim before she died." The police could also investigate Xiao Jin. They knew that this was a girl who had just been admitted to the hospital for suicide. The reason for suicide was that she was addicted to drugs. And the reason for this drug addiction was related to Tan Shuajia. That night, Tan Shuajia took Xiao Jin to the bar. Not only did she get addicted to drugs, but she also almost died. There was a surveillance video to prove this. Although the specific situation was not clear, based on Xiao Jin's suicide, there should be a big conflict between her and Xiao Jin. Then, Tan Shuajia's murder must be related to Xiao Jin. However, Xiao Jin had a perfect alibi, so the police could only ask for clues. Sort of. Xiao Jin smiled indifferently. She's the one who made me addicted to drugs, so I'll suffer the backlash. You have to bear the consequences of your actions. The policewoman was stunned and caught the question in Xiao Jin's words. You mean, her death is related to you? Xiao Jin, of course not. I'm just talking about karma. The policewoman smiled. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the most novel reason among the people who came to record their statements. Most importantly, it was to completely remove himself from the situation. Did Xiao Jin think that Tan Shuajia's death was retribution for harming her? If that was the case, Xiao Jin should be even more suspicious. The policewoman found Xiao Jin's words interesting, so she asked, I think Miss Xiao's words are interesting. Since it has nothing to do with you, why do you say that Tan Shuajia's death is karma to some extent? In other words, do you think it's retribution for harming you? Xiao Jin raised a finger and shook it. It's not retribution for harming me. It's just a backlash. Because of her own problems, the matter became more serious. The policewoman frowned slightly. In the end, she asked some questions about the day of the crime, and Xiao Jin's answers were all correct. After all, she was in the hospital at the time, and there were no new records of her phone calls. Even if she wanted to hire someone to kill her, there was no trace of her. Chapter 20. She didn't suspect Xiao Jin at first, but the policewoman was a little suspicious after hearing Xiao Jin's strange words. Later on, her colleagues sent her some information. They found out that Xiao Jin's brain had been diagnosed when he was in the hospital, so her words couldn't be trusted. In other words, she wasn't a suspect. She was just agitated. Her relationship had become abnormal. She was really pitiful. Then Tang Shuajia's death was indeed her retribution. Xiao Jin wasn't a suspect. She asked a few simple questions and released Xiao Jin. When she came out, Xiao Fei had already rushed over. Why are you in the police station? She was still worried. When she saw Xiao Jin enter the police station, she rushed over immediately. Xiao Jin said, It's just a small matter. Fei, you're too reckless. Xiao Fei, ? Wasn't she just worried? Seeing that Xiao Jin was carrying a small bag, Xiao Fei said, Where are you going now that this has happened? Go back with Mom. Xiao Jin, no, I haven't finished what I need to do. I'll be back in the afternoon. Xiao Fei couldn't help but ask, What are you going to do? Xiao Jin glanced at Xiao Fei and said, Fei, do you believe in fate? Xiao Fei, it wasn't important whether they believed in fate or not. The main thing was that when Xiao Jin said this, Xiao Fei felt that it was over. Xiao Jin was really crazy. She could only say bitterly, It's not a matter of whether we believe in it or not. How should she answer this question? You can believe in fate a little. It's just that you can't find a way. I'll set up a stall and tell people their fortunes. Xiao Fei knew that there was no hope for Xiao Jin. She could only say in despair, Are you short of money? If you are short of money, I can help you. Xiao Jin chuckled. Money is just a worldly possession. It's not important. I'll take the rest when the time comes. She didn't know how to do fortune-telling for everyone. She only knew how to do it for those who had the aura of death and gray aura around them. Normally, there was nothing wrong with a person, so it was not suitable to read their physiognomy. Because this would instead bring about negative consequences for him. Xiao Fei could not stop him, so he could only send Xiao Jin over. Xiao Jin planned to find a place with the most people and the most mixed auras to carry out her fortune-telling plan. However, when she passed by a place, she didn't know what she saw and immediately gave up on her fortune-telling plan. She saw a person. There was a vast sea of people outside the car. Xiao Jin didn't know what she saw at all. He only saw that her eyes were staring in one direction, so he asked blankly, "Jin, what are you looking at?" Xiao Jin smiled. "I saw something good." Xiao Fei, although she didn't know why, she inexplicably had goosebumps. She couldn't stop Xiao Jin, so she could only look with her. However, there were people everywhere, so she couldn't see anything. Xiao Jin's eyes were fixed on a man who had entered a shopping mall. The man's clothes were a little old and he looked a little down and out. His hair was messy as if it hadn't been washed for a few days. In short, he had a rather dispirited image. He looked inconspicuous in the crowd, but he always gave people a feeling that he didn't fit in. The main thing was that the people around him at least looked very clean, but he looked like he had been sloppy for a long time. When passers-by walked past him, they would subconsciously take a few more glances and then avoid him. Chapter 21. Xiao Jin opened the car door. "Fei Fei, you go back first. I'm going to the mall to buy something." Xiao Fei perked up when she heard that. She wasn't good at anything else, but shopping was her forte. "Jin, what do you want to buy?" "Mommy will buy it for you. Mommy has good taste." Xiao Jin, no, there's still an age gap. You're already a woman. Xiao Fei, her heart was stabbed by her own daughter. She could only watch as Xiao Jin got out of the car and left. Xiao Jin entered the mall. Her eyes were locked on the man in front of her. Of course, because they were too far away, no one would notice her. No one would notice that her eyes were a little excited. She wasn't wrong. In this world, there were still remnants of the past. Just like now, she felt the existence of demonic aura. Demonic aura was just a kind of aura. It was different from death aura and gray aura. Demonic aura was colorless and odorless. Moreover, it was transformed by a spiritual psychic. When a human had the ability of a spiritual psychic, they would be endowed with unparalleled abilities by the heavens. However, if they used this ability to go astray, demonic aura would appear in their bodies. It was equivalent to walking on a path that didn't conform to the right path. In other words, this was a power that wasn't recognized by the rules. They had to pay the corresponding price. This kind of spiritual psychic's ability would be restricted to when they produced demonic aura. They would never be able to evolve. They were also known as demons. In terms of the fundamental system, they were already the opposite of orthodox spiritual psychics. Among the demons, the probability of being a wizard was the highest. Array masters and spiritual psychics were relatively rare. Wizards were the most likely to have all kinds of strange demons. However, this was an excellent thing for Xiao Jin. She followed the man into the mall. He walked all the way to the innermost part of the mall. His body was bent, but he seemed to be getting more and more excited. His final goal was to walk to a jewelry store. This jewelry store was located at the innermost part of the first floor of the mall. Next to it was an escape tunnel entrance. The elevator was on the left side of the jewelry store. The environment was not exactly cramped. After all, most shopping malls were like that. When he walked into the jewelry store, although he was dressed sloppily, the shop assistant was still of high quality. She smiled politely and said, "Hello, sir. What would you like to buy?" The man looked around the luxurious jewelry store and pointed at a gold necklace in the outermost counter. The shop assistant didn't think there was any problem. She went over and took out the golden necklace for him. Do you want to see this one? However, as soon as she took it out, the man violently snatched it and stuffed it into his coat pocket. Then, he walked out of the store. The shop assistant was dumbfounded. No, sir, you didn't pay. A shop assistant at the door reacted quickly and grabbed the man's arm. Sir, you didn't pay. Before he could finish his words, the man turned his head furiously and growled. With a bang, a large piece of glass next to the elevator in the shopping mall exploded and shattered into pieces. Ah! This directly scared the other passers-by in the mall. The few people who were on the elevator felt their legs go soft on the spot. Screams rang out. The staff of the jewelry store were also shocked by this sudden change and stopped what they were doing. Chapter 22. Soundwave Attack. He was indeed a beginner wizard, but he was also demonized. Xiao Jin's mouth raised a trace of a smile. The ability was not proficient, so it should not have appeared more than a week ago. He probably dared to rob the jewelry store after some hesitation. A piece of broken glass would only make the mall fall into a panic, and most people were still a little confused. The man suddenly roared several times in a row. His voice was louder and louder. On the stairs inside the mall, the glass of several stores directly burst. Bang, 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 the broken glass burst, the fragments splashed on the ground, and the mall fell into extreme chaos. Everyone reacted and began to scream and run out of the mall. The owner of the jewelry store was also scared out of his wits. The man turned around and saw that a piece of glass in the jewelry store was broken. He collected the dozens of gold jewelry inside and put them into his pocket. Then, he turned around and ran out of the escape tunnel. The staff had been scared by the change in the mall and ran out, and no one dared to stop his behavior. Xiao Jin was just about to chase after him, and suddenly a figure blew by like the wind. She heard a low murmur of reports. A new monster has been confirmed, on the first floor of the Puming department store. Its ability is Sound Explosion. It robbed a jewelry store and escaped. A strong man in a t-shirt chased toward the escape tunnel. When everyone was running outside in fright, his behavior was quite surprising. Xiao Jin stopped in her tracks and pondered. It seemed that there was a formal organization to catch these things. But it was a pity that she saw the monster, and she needed it. Of course, she could not directly follow him now. After thinking about it, Xiao Jin bowed her head, and a few pieces of broken glass burst at her feet. She lowered her head and lifted the glass, seemingly casually, but a few red dots appeared in her pupils. She kicked the broken glass with her feet and placed it in the corresponding position according to the red dots. In an instant, a breeze that others could not feel blew, and the broken glass slightly changed its direction. Xiao Jin looked at the direction of the broken glass at the end. East Gate. Sky Crossing Bridge. She did not hesitate to go in the corresponding direction. While she was walking, she took out her phone. The ringtone seemed to follow her movements and started ringing. She picked up the call. Without waiting for the other party to speak, she said directly, "I gave you a hint and did what I should." Huo Ling was dumbfounded. She only dared to make this call after she got the phone number. However, the other party did not hesitate to say that Xiao Jin knew that she would call. With Xiao Jin's status, would he deliberately remember a nurse's phone number? She immediately understood that Xiao Jin knew everything. This realization overturned all the doubts in her heart. She broke down and cried, "It's my fault, it's my fault. Is there no more chance now? Miss Xiao, is there any hope for my brother's leg?" Xiao Jin's voice did not have the slightest pity. This is the cycle of cause and effect. Your brother is destined. I gave you a hint because I got something I needed from you, and the reward I gave you was a certain chance to prevent your brother's accident after you went back. It's just a fight, but now it's destined. It's useless to regret. Think about it. I have something to do now. I'll hang up first." She hung up the phone and continued to move toward her goal with calm eyes. Chapter 23. The man escaped through the emergency exit and ran under the overpass. Xiao Jin came out faster than he did. She jogged on the bridge at a leisurely pace. And the person chasing him was another man in a black t-shirt. Everyone was attracted by the changes in the mall, and not many people noticed the man who was running away. Because he had more jewelry, he had left behind a necklace when he was running away in a panic. At the same time, he wiped his nose with his hand, and blood seeped out. In the beginning, when one used more power than they could bear, they would have all kinds of problems. He had just shattered several pieces of glass in one breath, which was obviously beyond his ability limit. He had no choice but to run away. However, he didn't expect someone to be bold enough to chase after him. He turned around and saw the man in a black t-shirt chasing after him. He roared, and another piece of glass exploded on the side of the overpass, right above the man in the black t-shirt. However, the man in the black t-shirt didn't panic at all. He covered his head and jumped through the circle of glass explosion. An invisible barrier blocked his body, and the broken glass fell, but it didn't hit him. Instead, the pedestrians around him screamed. The sloppy man looked terrified. He didn't hesitate anymore and ran forward. Xiao Jin was on the overpass, and the red dots in her eyes appeared everywhere. She followed the directions, which would be the end of the sloppy man. Opposite the mall was a towering building. Song Yanqing was wearing a dark blue suit and sitting in an office chair. As he was in the main seat, he noticed the chaos in the mall. Although he was far away, his eyesight was excellent. The secretary who was reporting came forward and asked, "President." Song Yanqing stretched out a finger. "Check it out." The secretary also noticed the chaos below and nodded. "Okay." After the secretary left, Song Yanqing closed his eyes and slowly opened them. His pupils didn't change at all, but in his vision, the sky and earth had changed color. The bustling city had been covered by a thick layer of shadow. Countless strange-looking demons were shuttling through the sky and earth, making terrifying sounds. There were also some that were charging at him, frantically pounding on the glass of the building. As if they were certain that Song Yanqing could see them, a twisted and crazy smile appeared on their hideous faces, and their terrifyingly huge bodies slammed against the glass. Every sound was thick and clear. This scene was enough to scare any ordinary human. However, Song Yanqing was very calm. Ever since he was young, whenever he encountered an abnormal situation, what he saw was always different from others. It was a world that could make people feel despair and suffocation. It was clearly in the same space as them, but no one could see it. In this world, terrifying demons ran rampant, and there was no light at all. Only he could see it. She had been frightened when she was young, but now, she was used to it. However, this time, his eyes narrowed slightly. Through the giant body of the demon, in that world of humans and ghosts, he looked down from the top floor. In a dark and chaotic world, on a bridge floating in dark fog, there was a figure emitting a hazy light. It was the only ray of light in this world. One was a light that he had never seen in this terrifying world in the past 20 years. Chapter 24. Xiao Jin sensed something. She turned her head in an instant and locked her gaze on the building. Unfortunately, she hadn't made a formation to strengthen the vision of this body. She could only feel a different aura over there. However, in an instant, she saw something different. A few huge shadows flew through the air like ink, but Xiao Jin could see the shape at once. The Rakshasa realm. She was slightly surprised. Other than the human world, there were other worlds and dimensions that humans could not touch. They coexisted with them, but they were basically incompatible. Only gifted psychic trainers could touch the boundary. The Rakshasa realm was a world where demons ran rampant. The appearance of demons among spiritual readers had something to do with the Rakshasa realm. Ordinary demons might be able to get a trace of the aura of the Rakshasa realm, but in this situation, it was clear that someone's soul coexisted with the Rakshasa realm. But how could such a shocking thing exist in this world? She looked over coldly. Although she couldn't see anyone, the aura of death was too obvious. She had only seen it from Song Yanqing. Song Yanqing. Xiao Jin hesitated for a moment. Her gaze swept across the aura of death, but in the end, she still chased after her target. Forget it. Her premonition made her feel that today was not a suitable day to go. When she left, the Rakshasa realm also disappeared. Song Yanqing opened his eyes. The world had returned to normal. He looked down with his naked eye. It was just ordinary eyes. No matter how good his vision was, it was impossible for him to distinguish where the light came from. His lips were strangely pale. Compared to his usual gentleness, there was a hint of impatience at this moment. It had never happened before. He had never seen light in this world. He needed to know what it was. It seemed to be a person, but he couldn't see clearly. When she chased to the back of a remote residential building, she didn't move. It was already a very old residential area, and it was the kind where many people lived. There were some dusty workers nearby. It could be seen that this should be the place where the working people lived. She was standing at the back door. It looked like an alley, but there were doors on both sides. It was daytime working hours now, so no one walked by for the time being. There was only an auntie washing clothes beside the sink. He even cast a curious glance at Xiao Jin. Xiao Jin smiled. "Auntie, when your son comes back tonight, don't fry beans for him." "Auntie," she pondered for a moment, then displayed the demeanor of an auntie. She rolled her eyes. By the time Xiao Jin finished speaking, the scruffy-looking man had already run into the building. The terrain here was more complicated, but he still managed to shake off the black t-shirt man after turning here and there. However, he didn't expect to bump into Xiao Jin right away. He didn't know Xiao Jin, so he was naturally stunned. Then, he subconsciously covered his bag and walked inside. Xiao Jin stretched out his hand and waved it in a circle above his head. The sloppy man suddenly felt a headache. Xiao Jin had already transformed a black crystal from his brain. This was a spirit seed. It was something that every spiritualist would have. It represented the spiritualist's ability. The man had already become a monster, and the spirit seed in his brain had also turned black. However, other than Xiao Jin, no other spiritualist in this world could take out someone else's spirit seed. Her movements were very fast, and a cloud of black gas dissipated at her fingertips. The man just turned his head and looked at Xiao Jin strangely. He didn't feel any discomfort. Chapter 25. Xiao Jin took away his ability because he was about to die. The aura of death lingered around his body. If he was not killed, he would be devoured by the demonized spirit seed. Demons usually did not have a good ending. The demonized spirit seed was the credit of the Rakshasa world. This thing would be taken back by the Rakshasa world in the end. Xiao Jin had a use for the demonized spirit seed. This thing was also a good material to block her own formation. Of course, she could not take in every demonized spirit seed. For someone who was about to die, it would be fine if she took it. Xiao Jin left very naturally. The auntie glanced at her again and did not say anything. After Xiao Jin left, the man in the black t-shirt quickly caught up. He looked around and lost track of the man. When he saw the auntie washing clothes, he asked anxiously, "Auntie, did you see someone wearing a black coat? It's a little shabby." The auntie did not wait for him to finish and pointed in a direction. The man in the black t-shirt immediately looked grateful. "Thank you." After he went to chase the man, the auntie's son, who was in primary school, came back not long after. She had a son at an old age and cherished this son very much. It was already noon. "Mom, what are we eating for lunch?" "I'll fry beans for you." The auntie bought the beans to fry at noon. She did not take Xiao Jin's words to heart. After the beans were fried, the auntie also finished cooking. She asked her son to eat quickly and go to school. She did not expect that because she ate too quickly, her son would soon show a painful expression. A bean was stuck in his throat. It could not go up or down. Soon, it caused him to suffocate. The auntie screamed in fright. She was flustered but did not know what to do. Her son's face quickly turned purple from suffocation. At this moment, a man broke in. It was the man in the black t-shirt just now. When he saw the situation in the house, he seemed to know what was going on. He pushed the child hard with his palm. Pfft, a bean was spat out from his mouth. Phew! The child immediately took a deep breath of fresh air. He finally recovered. The auntie was crying. Now that she saw that her son was fine, she was relieved and thanked the man in the black t-shirt. "Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much." Chao Ikai stood up. "No need to thank me. You should be glad that I happened to be here. Otherwise, your son would be gone." The mother definitely did not know how to give first aid. This kind of suffocating substance could cause death very quickly. If she had been a little later, the child would have been gone. The child kept coughing, but at least he had recovered. The auntie suddenly thought of something and was a little annoyed. "It's all my fault. A little girl told me not to fry beans for the child at noon, but I didn't listen. I didn't expect the child to almost be in trouble." Chao Ikai's eyebrows jumped. "Auntie, what did you say?" The auntie kept crying. "It was a little girl who asked me not to fry beans for her child." Chao Ikai was shocked. "How does she know that we can't feed the children fried beans?" The middle-aged woman suddenly reacted. "That's right. I don't even know that little girl. I put the beans in the back room. How would she know that I bought beans?" At that time, it was because of this reaction that she felt that this girl was talking nonsense. That was not the point. Chao Ikai's sharp intuition told him that something was wrong. Did she happen to appear here? Chapter 26. The woman told him what had happened. "I don't know her." Chao Ikai was a little hesitant, but he didn't think too much about it. It was hard for most people to believe such a thing. He thought of something and returned to the place where he had chased the man. He caught the man, but he didn't have any abilities when he used the detector. However, when he was in the shopping mall, he had used his sonic explosion ability. They were in charge of this, but this monster made them feel that something was wrong. Xiao Jin had gained something. She didn't rush back at noon and found a fast food restaurant to eat. She wasn't picky about food, as long as it could fill her stomach. After she finished eating, she walked out of the fast food restaurant with a sneaky shadow following her. The corners of her lips curled up into a smile as she followed the man's wishes and walked towards a secluded area. When they reached the back of a building, the man couldn't help but step forward and grab Xiao Jin's hair. Xiao Jin now had shoulder-length hair. Sensing his movement, she immediately turned her head. It was a familiar face. His hair was shaved into a crew cut, and his body was covered with tattoos. The difference was that his facial features were very delicate, and he wore an earring. His name was Gao Xinke, a bootlicker who liked to talk about Shuejia. In the most fashionable words, he was a bootlicker. Even if Shuejia treated him like air, he would still gladly endure it. At this moment, he was looking at Xiao Jin with a hint of hostility in his eyes. When he saw Xiao Jin suddenly turn her head, he paused for a moment, but soon showed a look of extreme hatred. Is Shuejia's death related to you? Tan Shuejia's sudden death, and the murderer had no clue. It wasn't just the police who wanted to catch the murderer, but also this bootlicker. Gao Xinke didn't have any clues. He only remembered that Tan Shuejia was relatively close to Xiao Jin when she was alive. Plus, Tan Shuejia said that Xiao Jin would hate her, so it seemed that Xiao Jin had a reason to kill Tan Shuejia. Gao Xinke went straight to Xiao Jin. He thought that even if it wasn't Xiao Jin who did it, it should be Xiao Jin who got someone to do it. Xiao Jin looked Gao Xinke up and down. Why do you say that? It seems that you're the more suspicious one. Xiao Jin had met Gao Xinke a few times with Tan Shuejia, so they knew each other. Gao Xinke didn't like this delicate young lady in the first place. At this moment, her hostility was even stronger, making people feel afraid just by looking at her. You were discharged from the hospital so soon, but Shuejia died instead. 52 cuts, you're really ruthless. Xiao Jin raised his finger and shook it. This is a society ruled by law. You have to have evidence to back up your claims. Also, I advise you not to blame it on me. Otherwise, you will suffer retribution. Retribution. Shuejia was so good to you. She died, but you didn't even come to see her. Gao Xinke had obviously lost her mind. Xiao Jin sighed. They said that my brain is not good. I think people like you should go to the hospital for a checkup. Tan Shuejia made me addicted to drugs. I didn't have time to settle the score with her. She died first. You actually said that she was good to me before. That's too much. Gao Xinke didn't listen to Xiao Jin at all. Instead, she became more and more angry. She reached out to grab Xiao Jin's hair and drag her away. This behavior was really too much, so Xiao Jin didn't show mercy. In an instant, she turned her wrist, grabbed Gao Xinke's shoulder, and threw him directly to the ground. Chapter 27. Xiao Jin's fall wasn't light. Gao Xinke fell to the ground with a loud thud. Gao Xinke started howling on the spot. There weren't many people behind the building, but his howl attracted the attention of a few passers-by. When they saw that it was a girl hitting a boy, they immediately snickered and didn't pay attention. Gao Xinke's spine felt like it was about to be broken by Xiao Jin's fall. The pain was heart-wrenching. He didn't expect Xiao Jin to have such ability. In the past, Xiao Jin was a yes-man. Anyone who spoke loudly could scare her, let alone resist like this. Gao Xinke gritted his teeth and struggled to get up. He was kicked to the ground by Xiao Jin. What about me? When Xiao Jin hit him, the corners of his mouth were especially wide. I'm such a kind person. Why did you come looking for trouble with me? Do you have a conscience? If Gao Xinke had a conscience, of course, he wouldn't have come. It didn't matter if he looked for Xiao Jin. There was a faint gray aura around him, which had something to do with Xiao Jin. This meant that he had also suffered a small backlash because of Xiao Jin's incident. It wasn't serious at first, but now that he had come looking for trouble with Xiao Jin, the gray aura had become more serious. The karma that Xiao Jin carried wasn't something that ordinary people could come into contact with. Gao Xingke didn't expect that Xiao Jin, who was nothing in his eyes, could beat him to the point that he couldn't get up. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he also felt embarrassed. At this moment, he found another pot for Xiao Jin. You were really pretending in the past. Xuejia trusted you so much. Xiao Jin, she exhaled softly and realized that some people couldn't be understood. If you want to investigate me, why don't you investigate why Tan Xuejia is so heavy? Xiao Jin didn't want to talk to Gao Xingke anymore. That's all I have to say. Tan Xuejia's death has nothing to do with me. If you come looking for trouble with me again, it won't be as simple as a beating next time. With that, she turned around and left. Behind him, Gao Xingke got up and gritted her teeth as she watched Xiao Jin leave. That's right. Look at this video. Don't you think her behavior is very strange? In a certain underground area, in front of a seemingly advanced room, there were two people standing together, watching what happened in the afternoon. Xiao Yikai and his colleagues were investigating the crime committed by the man in the mall this afternoon. They re-watched the video and noticed something strange. The handsome colleague, Hua Yanming, pointed to the location where Xiao Jin appeared on the computer. At that time, everyone was scared out of the mall, even the staff. But look at her. She stayed in the mall for a while, then chose a direction to go out. That's the direction where the monster escaped. Xiao Yikai narrowed his eyes and re-watched the video. Suddenly, he said, there's movement under her feet. Zoom in and take a closer look. Hua Yanming also noticed what Xiao Yikai said. They looked carefully and indeed found that Xiao Jin seemed to have made some small movements in the video at that time. The two men seemed to have found a big clue. Their faces were solemn. When they zoomed in on the video, suddenly, the whole room burst with the sound of an electric explosion. The computer screen also emitted a crackling sound, and suddenly, the entire screen exploded. The two men were so scared by this sudden thing that they covered their heads and hid. Chapter 28. Xiao Jin chose to go home in the afternoon. She had gained quite a lot today. She had obtained a demonized spirit seed. When she reached home, Xiao Jin took a closer look at the Mu family's feng shui layout. According to their point of view, the Mu family was in a better position. After all, they were a big family. Before buying such a house and decorating it, they had consulted a master. However, no matter how good the feng shui layout was, it was child's play in front of Xiao Jin. She could not say that she did not believe in feng shui, but it was a long-term change. Formations were also divided into long-term and short-term effects. Wealth and power were not what Xiao Jin was after. However, her current body was a little weak. She needed to strengthen her body, and she would treat it as a reward for living with the Mu family. When she entered the courtyard, there were servants watering the flowers in the courtyard. She glanced at them, and a wisp of gray gas popped out. It slowly drifted into the midst of the meticulously raised flowers. She could not see any changes. As materials for formations, nature rarely had the ability to change things. It mainly depended on the ability of the formation master. According to the information she had searched on the internet for the past week, feng shui now was a weaker version of formations. Most of the attention was paid to the layout of objects and the feng shui layout of nature. However, after careful study, there were indeed some tricks. That was because the ability that Xiao Jin relied on was not something that could be mastered by the people of today. To be able to research feng shui, it meant that the people of the later era were quite capable. She entered the Mu family. They had not returned yet. Even Xiao Fei was shopping outside. She probably thought that Xiao Jin was still playing outside. There was no one in the Mu family now. She walked into her room in 2 or 3 steps. Then, she asked the servant to get ink. She dripped a few drops of her blood into it and drew a pattern on a huge open space in the room. The floor was a renovated wooden floor, but it did not affect it. Xiao Jin drew a huge and complicated pattern on the ground. It was the kind that art students would faint at a glance. When Xiao Jin finished drawing, every part of the pattern seemed to be connected to each other. The pattern suddenly sank into the floor and disappeared. There seemed to be a wave in the house that no one else could feel. With Xiao Jin's room as the center point, transparent ripples spread out from the air. Xiao Jin took out the demonized spirit seed that he had snatched. With a twist of his finger, the spirit seed turned into ashes. Like a wisp of hot smoke, it sank into the floor and disappeared. It was an improved version of the spirit array. Not only could it help her gradually strengthen this body's 5 vision and 6 senses, but it could also block a portion of the backlash. But it was not enough. She calculated the time. At the latest, there was still a month before the first powerful backlash would come. Even she couldn't tell what it was. It could be an accident, or it could be some kind of natural disaster. In short, it was the kind that could accidentally kill her. Xiao Jin wasn't sure if he could avoid it, but he had to find a way to visit Song Yanqing again. He had so much death aura. If he didn't do anything, he would be letting society down. Of course, the spirit array that she drew would also indirectly strengthen the Mu family's luck. She's in the room. Yes, second young master. She's in the room. It was worth mentioning that once the spirit array was drawn, it was equivalent to having the surveillance rights of the entire Mu family. Even if the room was soundproof, as long as there was information about her, it could be transmitted to her ears. The second young master of the Mu family, Musichu, was back. His voice sounded cold and was different from Mu Qilian's fiery temper. He was more calm and steady. That was the most obvious difference between the Mu twins. Chapter 29. Why did the second young master of the Mu family ask her? After a while, someone knocked on the door. She opened the door, and a maid said to her gently, "Miss Hua, the second young master is back." Xiao Jin returned home. Under Qiao Fei's order, the servants now called her Miss Hua. It was undoubtedly acknowledging her identity. For an adopted child, being the daughter of the Mu family was the supreme honor. Especially now when she was mentally ill, Qiao Fei still didn't give up. Moreover, Mu Jinming allowed it. The couple could be said to be broad-minded. Xiao Jin thought carefully and asked, "Does his return have anything to do with me?" Hearing this, the maid smiled awkwardly and said, Just to inform you, the second young master asked you just now. Why don't you go down and say hello to him? This is also Madam's order." Qiao Fei thought that Xiao Jin hadn't officially met the family members yet. Xiao Jin was silent for a moment and then said, "Okay." She went downstairs, and the servants downstairs were preparing something for Musichu to drink. It was said that he went to a meeting yesterday and didn't come back for the whole night. Musichu's clothes were also very different from Musilian's. If they didn't look the same, the twins should be the same in everything. This was not a concept in the Mu family. Musichu's casual style was more mature than Musilian's. He was wearing a white shirt and had the same refreshing temperament as Musilian, but he was much calmer and looked much more serious than Musilian. Like Musilian, Qiao Jin narrowed her eyes when she saw Musichu. Musichu was also very clean, and there was basically no bad luck on him. This basically didn't conform to the law of karma. For such a situation to occur, there was only one explanation. Xiao Jin's matter didn't have much to do with the 2 brothers of the Mu family. However, in her memory, it seemed that the Mu brothers had ordered Tan Shuejia to approach Qiao Jin. But where did this news come from? Oh, Tan Shuejia said it herself. Qiao Jin instantly understood where the problem lay. Of course, even if they didn't suffer any karmic backlash, it didn't mean that they weren't responsible. The slight gray aura was the best proof. For example, Qiao Fei and Mu Xinming, who were completely uninvolved, didn't have this aura. Perhaps they were the ones who had ordered Shuejia to do this. Their specific request wasn't that malicious, but it didn't seem to be full of good intentions either. Letting a woman like Tan Shuejia get close to Qiao Jin was not a good thing. When Musichu saw Qiao Jin, his eyes under his short hair were dark and deep. He suddenly asked, "How are you feeling now?" Although he was concerned, his tone was calm, as if he was just asking a normal question. Musichu had a cold personality and rarely cared about others. This was something that everyone in the Mu family knew. It was really surprising that he suddenly cared about this sister who came from another place. Qiao Jin waved his hand and said, "Fortunately, I'm fine now. You don't have to worry about me." Musichu, the other servants, Miss Huo was really crazy. However, she always called her parents by their names. What was so strange about calling Musichu by his name? Musichu obviously couldn't accept it. He lowered his eyes and said, "It's useless to hate me. According to age, I'm still your second brother." He thought that Qiao Jin called him by his name because he didn't like them. After all, Qiao Fei wanted to take Qiao Jin home, but they refused. Chapter 30. Qiao Jin went forward and sat down. "Actually, I don't hate her. Fei Fei just asked me to come down and say hello to you." She really didn't hate anyone. At her position, she treated everyone equally. To put it bluntly, these people weren't worthy of standing in the position she hated. The only one she hated was her old enemy, who she didn't even know if he was dead or alive. As for others, she was quite peaceful. Gods would only be full of pity for humans. Qiao Jin wasn't a god, but to them, her identity wasn't far off. Even Tan Shuejia, who caused Qiao Jin to commit suicide, she didn't hate her. But she wouldn't let them off the hook for the price they had to pay. She respected karma. Musichu's eyes flashed. "Fei Fei." The other servants came forward and whispered, "It's Madam." Musichu, he looked at Qiao Jin and disagreed. "She's also your mother. You lack the basic respect." Qiao Jin also disagreed. "A name is just a code name. I call him that doesn't mean that I don't respect him. I also respect Xinming very much." Musichu, Xinming, his father's name. He recognized it. The servant reminded him even more softly. "Second young master." After Miss Huo came back from the hospital, she pointed at her head again, and Musichu understood. He suddenly fell silent and didn't ask any more questions. The servant also served Qiao Jin a cup of tea. After Qiao Jin finished drinking, Qiao Fei came back. When she saw Qiao Jin coming back, she was pleasantly surprised. She handed the paper bag she was carrying to the servant. "Oh my God, Jin, you're back. Mom just found out about the glass explosion in the mall you went to in the afternoon. Are you okay?" She didn't see that when Qiao Jin went there, the mall exploded, and the driver left quickly. She only found out the news when she arrived at the door. She remembered and was about to call Qiao Jin when she saw that he was at home. He felt much more at ease. Qiao Jin waved his hand. "I'm fine. I'm going somewhere else." When Qiao Fei saw that Musichu was also at home, he immediately said softly, "Chi Chu, have you said hello to your sister?" Musichu nodded and looked at her. "What glass explosion?" "I don't know. Xiao Fei sat down and said, I sent my sister to the shopping mall at noon. Then I found out about the glass explosion. It seemed that everything was fine, but the glass of the escalators and shops in the shopping mall suddenly exploded. Several people were injured. I happened to send Jean there, and I thought something happened to her. I was almost scared to death. It seemed that the robbery incident had been brushed aside, and everyone's attention had shifted to the sudden explosion of the glass. After all, it was very difficult to link these two things together. Musichu nodded. He glanced at Xiao Jin and didn't ask more. Xiao Fei looked at Xiao Jin and said with concern, Jin, you have to go to the hospital for a checkup tomorrow. Mom will go with you. The toxins in her body had to be completely eliminated. She had to go for a checkup at least twice in a month. Xiao Jin nodded. After talking about her checkup, Xiao Fei said, by the way, it will be the 25th birthday of young Master Song soon. It will be very grand. We must be there on time. Xiao Jin suddenly looked up. Young Master Song Yanqing. Xiao Fei, she suddenly had an ominous feeling in her heart. Chapter 31. Xiao Jin's words to Song Yanqing were still ringing in her ears. If she went there, it would be a big deal. However, Xiao Fei couldn't not bring Xiao Jin there. She held Xiao Jin's hand and said earnestly, Xiao Jin, I'll take you with me when the time comes, but you must not say anything. Just attend the banquet with us and leave together, okay? Mu Chi-chu had also heard about Xiao Jin talking about the Song family's young master. Although Song Yanqing was famous for being sick, no one had ever dared to curse him to his face. Logically speaking, she shouldn't bring Xiao Jin there. However, Xiao Fei felt that since Xiao Jin was back, it would be inappropriate not to bring him there. However, she only begged Xiao Jin not to say anything. Xiao Jin's expression was also very serious. I won't say anything. She took the death aura and ran away. Xiao Fei was a little relieved. It's fine as long as you don't say anything. As long as Xiao Jin didn't say anything, the world would be balanced. Xiao Jin still felt that Song Yanqing was a little strange. Not only was the death aura extremely heavy, but there was also a problem with his fate. However, Xiao Jin hadn't come into contact with him before, so she couldn't tell what was going on for a while. After all, she still needed to set up a raise as her foundation. What she could understand at a glance was just some superficial things. That night, Musichu, Musilian, and Mu Jinming all returned home. It was an official welcome for Xiao Jin. Big brother was now working abroad for a year and a half and didn't come back often. Mu Jinming still maintained a basic level of rationality towards Xiao Jin. At least he showed the demeanor of the head of the family and welcomed Xiao Jin to the Mu family. Musichu and Musilian didn't react. Xiao Fei clapped happily. Xiao Jin smiled and said to them, Thank you for your welcome, and thank you Jinming and Fei Fei. We will be a family in the future. I will also take care of you. The three father and son of the Mu family, Xiao Fei's smile stiffened for a moment, but she quickly said happily, Okay. We will be a family in the future. Anyway, she was really happy about Xiao Jin's arrival. Then she immediately asked Xiao Jin to eat. Eating more and talking less was the right thing to do. Musilian sneered and rolled his eyes. Mu Jinming frowned slightly, indicating that even if he didn't like it, he shouldn't express it. After all, the demeanor of a young master of the Mu clan was still important. The first official meal passed in a peaceful but abnormal atmosphere. Early the next morning, Musilian and Musichu had to go to school. After all, they were only a little older than Xiao Jin and were now in university. Xiao Jin had to go for a checkup first. When they arrived at the hospital, it was nothing more than a routine blood test and some tests. The results would be out at noon. They had special identities, so the results of the checkup were naturally very fast. However, during the checkup, Xiao Jin saw Huoling, who had called her, standing by the side. Her complexion didn't look good to the naked eye. She was so pale that it was scarier than a patient's. If it weren't for the fact that she knew Xiao Jin would come back for a checkup, she would have gone back to her hometown to see her brother. However, there were still some questions in her heart. She wouldn't give up until she got to the bottom of it. When Xiao Jin was doing the checkup, she couldn't get close. When the checkup was over and they needed to wait for the results, Xiao Jin found an excuse to leave Xiao Fei. She sat alone in the corridor of the small garden outside the hospital. When Huoling saw her sitting there alone, she looked grateful and hurried over. Chapter 32. Miss Xiao. Huoling's voice choked, as if she was about to cry. I really don't know what to do. Xiao Jin sighed slowly. I've already said that it has happened. Now that she was asking her what to do, she was just doing it as usual. She could let people guard against disasters, but she didn't have the ability to restore people to their original state after a disaster. It's me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have disbelieved you. Huoling stood in front of her uneasily with tears on her eyelashes. I just want a positive result now. Do I have a chance to make up for it? Xiao Jin looked at her and smiled faintly. It's not strange or not. I can understand that it's hard for normal people to accept this kind of thing. I'm just reminding you from my position. I've done what I should do. What else do you want to know now? Huoling lowered her head and bit her lip. A tear had already fallen. In fact, she didn't know either. Even if she believed that Xiao Jin could know something, she also knew that once something like life happened, it was useless to make up for it. Her brother's leg was broken, and no one could save him. She regretted it now. If she had taken it as a joke at that time and believed Xiao Jin's words and went back, wouldn't this have happened? Xiao Jin waved her hand. Actually, you don't have to blame yourself. You just have a chance to prevent this from happening, but you can't guarantee your brother's safety for the rest of his life. If you really feel that you can't get over it, I can give you a positive answer. Huoling looked at her with red eyes. What answer? Xiao Jin suddenly reached out and held her hand. As long as you persuade your brother to get through this as soon as possible and accept the fact, your family will have a great chance in the future. If you can't get through it, you won't be able to grasp this great chance. Huoling was stunned. What she said was unbelievable. She had already talked about the future. If it were in the past, Huoling would definitely not believe it, but now, she believed it. Xiao Jin let go of her hand. I've said enough. If you know too much, you won't have the fortune to enjoy it. There was a reason why the heavenly secrets could not be revealed. Huoling looked at her hand that the young girl had just held. Her palm was a little cold, unlike the temperature of a normal person. However, there was a warmth that transcended the secular world that seemed to be able to calm her heart. After Huoling left, Xiao Fei came back to Xiao Jin. Jin, what are you doing here? The results are out. Let's go back with the results. Xiao Jin looked in the direction where Huoling left, nodded, and left with Xiao Fei with a smile. The head nurse saw Huoling walking towards Xiao Jin. The two of them stood there and talked for a long time. But what did Xiao Jin's condition require a nurse to explain? The head nurse thought of the blood-drawing incident and stopped Huoling when she came back. Huoling, what did you say to Miss Xiao? Huoling's condition had suddenly become extremely bad these 2 days. The head nurse didn't know if it was because of the deduction of money that affected Huoling, but it was only 1,000 yuan. She shouldn't be so angry, right? When she asked her what was wrong, she didn't say anything and only said that she wanted to confirm something. At this moment, the head nurse couldn't help but grab her and ask. Huoling looked at the head nurse and hesitated before saying, "Head nurse, something big happened in my family. I might have to take at least half a month off to go back." Her brother had broken his leg and was definitely in a bad mood. Xiao Jin had also said that he had to get through this. She couldn't go back for 2 days. Chapter 33. The head nurse was surprised. "You've been away for so long. What happened at home?" After all, this hospital was usually very busy. Usually, unless there was a serious reason or a last resort, the nurses rarely took leave. Because you didn't know if your position would be replaced as soon as you asked for leave. Huoling couldn't help crying. "My brother had a car accident 2 days ago. His left leg was amputated." The head nurse immediately understood. No wonder Huoling's condition had been so bad these 2 days. Her family was too unlucky, wasn't it? The head nurse couldn't help but think so. "Then you should have told me 2 days ago. Such a big thing happened." "You're really..." The head nurse was a little reproachful, but not too reproachful. "Come with me. Write the leave slip first. I'll ask the director to approve it for you." "Hey, then why did you have to go to work these 2 days? Why did you look for Miss Chow?" If she was short of money, she couldn't have asked a stranger to help her. Huoling was crying at this moment. She looked around when she heard this. She didn't know if she should talk about Xiao Jin, but when she thought about how she had said that Xiao Jin's brain was damaged, she felt a little guilty and wanted to clarify it for her. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, Xiao Lian followed the head nurse and stopped her sobbing. She tried her best to whisper, "Head nurse, you might not believe me, but I want to say that Miss Chow didn't have a brain problem after she committed suicide. She really did become enlightened." The head nurse turned her head and looked at her in disbelief. "Huoling, what did you say?" Realizing that her voice was too loud, she looked around and pulled Huoling back to her empty office. Huoling wiped her tears and told her story. Miss Chow was enlightened and knew something that others didn't know. "A week ago, when I drew Miss Chow's blood, she said not to let me." At that time, Huoling had briefly explained this to the head nurse, but she didn't take it seriously. Now, she recounted the events of that day in full detail. The head nurse was shocked when she heard Xiao Jin say that Huoling's brother would get into a car accident. Her jaw was about to drop. After a long time, she muttered, "That's impossible. How can there be such a ridiculous thing?" As doctors and nurses, they didn't believe in such things the most. Instead, they often received patients who were blindly superstitious and used some folk recipes to save patients, but in the end, they caused even more serious problems. But as medical staff, how could they believe this? "Huoling, have you really gone crazy? How can you believe such a thing?" The head nurse came to her senses and still felt that it was unreliable. "That's impossible. She's just talking nonsense. It's just a coincidence." Huoling did not believe it. It's fine if ordinary people say it blindly, but she clearly said that it was a black car. There are only a few colors of cars, but she said that it was black. Huoling wouldn't have believed her to this extent if she had only told her to pay attention to the car. When the head nurse heard this, she felt a chill run down her spine. What if it was Xiao Jin who did it? However, Xiao Jin didn't even know Huoling before, let alone her younger brother. And he was thousands of miles away. The head nurse was a little stunned. This This is simply, she suddenly didn't know what to say. Huo Ling wiped her eyes. I don't want to believe these things, but now that the truth is in front of me, I have to believe it. Chapter 34. Huo Ling didn't expect the head nurse to completely believe her words. She only said, "Head nurse, you can pretend that you don't know about this. I'm just sorry for thinking that there was something wrong with her brain. I want to clarify it for her. You're close to me. If it were someone else, I wouldn't dare to say that." The head nurse stared at Huo Ling for a long time. Forget it. Sign the leave request first. No matter what, don't tell anyone about what happened today. Miss Chow's identity isn't simple. If you say too much, you'll get into trouble. Huo Ling nodded. I know. The head nurse gave her the leave request and gave it to the director to sign. Huo Ling received the leave request and left. The head nurse didn't really believe it. Huo Ling was a normal girl. If she had gone crazy because of something, she wouldn't have implicated Qiao Jin for no reason. Forget it. Even if Qiao Jin really had some ability, as a head nurse, she didn't dare to investigate. This was just a small episode. Qiao Fei was a little confused when she received Qiao Jin's review results. When Qiao Jin was hospitalized, the report was true. But now, there was no poison in her body. It had only been 10 days since she committed suicide. If it wasn't for the hospital's own reporting system, she would have suspected that the hospital was joking. However, she was magnanimous. Since Qiao Jin was fine, it was a good thing. Not many people knew about this. As long as it wasn't spread, no one would know that her daughter had such a small matter. As long as she was healthy, it was fine. Song Yanqing's 25th birthday party was approaching. This was a big event that the entire imperial capital was paying attention to. Qiao Fei only needed to keep an eye on Qiao Jin and not let her talk nonsense. Still no results. In the dark basement, a few people were looking at the results that had just come out. No. Qiao Yikai's expression was cold. We've already checked dozens of times. There's no spirit seed in his body. That's impossible. The person who spoke was a fashionably dressed girl. She was young and looked like a student. She looked a little confused. The incident at the mall was obviously done by him. He admitted it himself. How can he be a spiritual reader without a spirit seed? But that's the truth. There's no spirit seed. Wearing a white lab coat, black-rimmed glasses, and a ponytail, the tall and beautiful woman said coldly, "Our investigation results can't be wrong. Either he's lying or something happened that we don't want to happen." The ponytailed woman sneered, "Someone can get the spirit seed. The kind of monster we are most afraid of has appeared." No, perhaps it was impossible for the entire spiritual thoughts world to do so. They were special existences in the calm vortex of this era. Which normal human would know that in this world, there were not only humans, but also a special kind of human existence. They were called spiritual readers. Chapter 35. Psychics had all kinds of abnormal abilities that usually appeared randomly. One type was born with psychic abilities and was in existence that special organizations valued and nurtured. There was also another type, which was acquired. Acquired psychic abilities were often quite troublesome because they had experienced all kinds of social stimuli to develop psychic abilities. Especially the former type of psychic. When they were young, they might not realize it and would cause confusion with acquired psychic abilities. It caused a lot of trouble for organizations like them. Generally speaking, psychics who were born with psychic abilities were very powerful. The latter type was often full of resentment towards the world and could easily become a demonized psychic. Demonized psychic would cause harm to society. Only people with strong minds could restrain the demonization and turn psychic abilities into normal abilities. The existence of organizations like them was formed by psychics. They were here to find demonized psychics and capture them or destroy them directly. They were called the Spirit Group. Humans did not know that they had to protect the safety of humans and maintain the normal operation of the world. So far, they only knew that psychics would awaken various abilities due to their specialties. They could only make a rough division. This time, the shopping mall was an emergency. Chow Ikai happened to be there at the time. Who would have thought that the demonized psychic he chased did not have a demonized spirit seed? The spirit seed existed in their bodies along with their abilities. The spirit seed could only be seen with special inspection equipment. It could not be taken out or touched. It was one with the psychic. Once the spirit seed was broken, the psychic would also die. Now, a demonized psychic without a spirit seed might have the ability to steal other people's spirit seeds. After all, in their understanding, someone who had the terrifying ability to directly steal other people's spirit seeds was definitely not a good thing. The woman in the white coat with a ponytail was the leader of the spirit group's third team, Hiao. The spirit group had many team members. Each team was not connected to each other and served different families and organizations. This was because it was not easy to cultivate a psychic. Not only did they have to protect humans, but they also had to face the revenge of some traitorous psychics and the threat of demonized psychics. However, the spirit group also existed in the headquarters. Only the headquarters would know the information of each team's psychic. Chow Ikai and the others were her subordinates. Not only was Hiao the captain, but she was also a forensic doctor. Sometimes, she would also investigate the abnormal situations of demonized psychics. Yi Shuadai, who looked young and was dressed fashionably, had just entered high school this year. However, she had been accepted as a member of Squad 3 very early on. This wasn't good news. Yi Shuadai panicked. This monster can steal other people's spiritual seeds. Will it be a threat to us? Hiao tapped on the file with a pen, her expression grave. It's hard to say. Chow Ikai thought of what happened in the mall, and the video of the mall that always had problems in the investigation results. He suddenly said, I might know who it is. But I don't have any concrete evidence. Hiao immediately looked at him. Why didn't you say so earlier? Chow Ikai bitterly smiled. We're not sure, but there were many unexpected situations when we were investigating her. Let's have a meeting, and I'll tell you about her. Chapter 36. Name, Xiao Jin. Age, 20. She is in her second year of university. 9 days ago, she committed suicide and was admitted to the hospital. The reason should be that she was stimulated by drugs. In the dark conference room, all the members of the 3 teams were gathered. Chow Ikai, Hua Yanming, Yi Shuadai, and the captain, Hiao. On the PowerPoint presentation was Xiao Jin's information. Hua Yanming was the one who introduced Xiao Jin's information. He was in charge of the investigation of the team's information. He pointed at Xiao Jin's student ID photo. It was a girl with a beautiful smile. She was fair and delicate, and her temperament was pure. She exuded the best vitality of a girl. Based on her life experience, she is a girl who is prone to spiritual thoughts. She lived in an ivory tower before the age of 20 and was well protected by her mother. It is worth mentioning that her mother is the current madam of the Mu family, Mu Jinming's wife. Mu Jinming is the chairman of the Mu Corporation. His main business is the automobile group. Now that he has acquired many companies, he has developed many additional businesses. Ishuadai was very honest. Fuck, he is really rich. Chow Ikai said to her with a serious face, children are not allowed to swear. Don't forget that you are underage. Ishuadai. TSK Hua Yanming smiled and continued, the relationship between Chao Jin's mother, Chao Fei, and Mu Zhenming is more like a domineering CEO romance drama. However, let's not talk about it for now. Chao Jin is not Chao Fei's biological child. She was adopted by Chao Fei and has been living in another city. Chao Fei and Mu Zhenming got back together half a year ago. However, she did not bring Chao Jin back to the Mu family. Instead, she brought Chao Jin to the capital. After that, a woman named Tan Shuejia got close to Chao Jin. After Chao Jin got together with her, it was obvious to the naked eye that she was led astray. A few days ago, she committed suicide because of drugs. I don't know if she was stimulated too much. According to the information, she used to be a good student who was praised by everyone. She was well-behaved and obedient, but she has changed significantly in the past 6 months. Ishuadai couldn't help but be curious. Is it because she knew that her mother wasn't her biological mother and didn't bring her back to the Mu family? Hua Yanming said, maybe. But after she committed suicide a few days ago, Chao Fei took her back to the Mu family. Chao Ikai added, there's another piece of news. We heard from the hospital that Chao Jin changed a lot after she woke up from her suicide. The medical staff didn't disclose the patient's information for confidentiality reasons, but the patients who had contact with Chao Jin all said that her brain became abnormal and she liked to curse others. Ishuadai. She awakened the power of spiritual thoughts. Is it a curse? But does it have anything to do with the people we investigated today? Hua Yanming's expression was serious. That's the problem. When the incident happened in the mall, not only was Ikai there, but she was also there. And we later found that she had abnormal behavior from the video. After the glass exploded, she was the only one who didn't run out. It was as if she wasn't afraid of an accident at all. But when we were about to investigate the video, all the videos had problems. The video data was damaged, and even 3 computers were destroyed. It's as if there's an abnormal force that's preventing us from investigating her. Chao Ikai nodded. The reason why we suspect her is that at least we can confirm that when I chased the demonized spiritual reader to his house, she also appeared nearby. She came with me. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.